We're all familiar with them. There are shortcuts to vital information. That's why, to familiarize you with the movie rating symbols which will be used by this theater, we present the following guide for parents and young people. It is designed to inform parents about the suitability of movie content for viewing by their children. G, GP, R, X, 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 X.
Fuck you.
Oh, yeah.
The audience doesn't know. It's just sneaking insults into the countdown.
Trying to distract you and throw you off.
Yeah, it didn't work. Still worked it out.
I still threw you off
a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Welcome to Movie Boners, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Justin is here. He's just drinking a beer at the time.
I was taking a drink.
What are you?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show.
What are you drinking today?
Well, man, it's super foamy. I don't think it's supposed to be. It's pretty good. It's interesting. So I am drinking a beer from Panther Island Brewing, which is in Fort Worth down here in Texas. It's called Road Trip Snacks. And it's a ale brewed with beaver nuggets.
What the hell are beaver nuggets?
What the fuck are beaver nuggets? So I had to do some Googling.
Okay.
Because I was afraid it was going to be something bad.
Sounds like beaver turds.
Right. I was a little worried. But then I found out it's brewed using some snacks from the famous Buc-ee's, which is a beaver down here. So they use one of their snacks with this beer. It's pretty good, actually. This kind of, I kind of wish I had more than just this one, because this feels like this is like one of those kind of nice to have around beers,
What kind is it? You probably said I wasn't listening.
It just says it's ale brewed with beaver nuggets.
An ale. Basic ale.
Yeah.
Nice.
But it's pretty good. Pretty good.
That sounds pretty good. Mine, I tried to get one the most appropriate one I could find, which I had in my fridge, but apparently I drank it all, so I don't have it for this. I got the Grimm Brothers. They all of their art on their cans are of the Little Red Riding Hood, but she's a little bit sexier than normal, and I was like, that seems like something.
Were you gonna go with the?
That seems like something.
Was that the Valentine's one or the?
Just all of their stuff. They have a Snowdrop one that has Snow White, and she's a little bit. Their art is always a sexier fairy tale lady. I was like, that seems like something that's PG at least, not a G-rated can.
That looks suggestive.
But apparently I drank all those. So the one that I have is just one that I got because it looked good. And I haven't had anything from this brewery before. It's the Eddie Line Brewery in somewhere in Colorado. Hold on. Buena Vista, Colorado. And it's called Jolly Roger Black Ale.
Ooh, I like that design. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's pretty sick looking, and it tastes good. It's a nice kind of. I've been drinking sweeter beers lately, and this is a more bitter, nice, manly, tough beer. So it's good. I drink a lot of fruity, sweet beer, so it is what it is.
I know,
but it's good.
Nice. Well, have you watched anything new?
I have watched a lot of things new. I'm supposed to be watching things for the Oscar episode and a couple of other big episodes, and I have done almost none of that. I keep watching fun stuff. I take that back. I did watch Being the Ricardos, and it was interesting because that's nominated for several things. It's kind of was interesting going into this episode because I Love Lucy is they talk about the standards and ratings of what's allowed on TV and what's not, and that's kind of interesting. They show a lot of her in her underwear, which is funny considering that the TV show was famous for scandalously showing a bedroom with two separate beds in it. So it was. You'll hear more about that in the Oscar episode, but it was all right.
Yeah. All right.
I watched, going back to last week, I didn't even know this was a game, but I found out after I saw the movie it was a game movie. It's recent. It's called Werewolves Within.
Oh, I haven't watched that yet, but I really want to because I heard it was funny.
It's funny. It's it takes me out of it. I am like hyper aware of like wokeness, and there's a lot of wokeness that kind of took me out of it. But it ends up in a pretty good place, and it is like you could argue it's for a purpose, but it's not as like funny as I thought. But I didn't know it was based on a VR game from like 5 years ago or whatever, 10 years ago. Apparently. So the mystery is kind of fun. It's just kind of an interesting movie. Although I watched Reminiscence from like 2018. I'd never seen that before.
Is that the one with Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman.
That wasn't 2018. That was like 2020.
Tandy Newton. Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was like, well, in my mind, 2018 is like 2 years ago. So
it's because the last couple of years have been absolute dog shit.
Yeah, they don't count as real years. But it was interesting as far as like a sci-fi movie, and they did all the stuff that we recommended in our Should You Date Movies episode, because it's set in the future. There's like global warming kind of happens, so a bunch of the the glaciers have melted, and Miami is basically like Venice, where the streets are like filled with water and stuff. But there's no like year on it. It's just like, here we are, we're in the world. And it is a cool like detective story. It was kind of I liked it a lot.
All right.
And then the last thing I watched a documentary on Netflix called Sleepless Unrest, and it is it's like a ghost hunter documentary about. So recently, the house that inspired The Conjuring was sold to somebody, and they started opening it up to like people to come and do ghost hunts there. And it's a documentary about this group of people that came in and brought their equipment and stayed like a couple weeks and experienced some weird stuff. And
all right,
if you like ghost adventures, which I love, it's pretty fun.
Well, I went and watched. I have supported our draft ish. I had a bunch of free tickets to use.
Are you only using them on your movies?
No, I'm using the free ones on yours. Why would I?
That's what I mean. You're only supporting your movies.
Yeah, I'm only supporting mine. But I did go and see The Cursed.
Oh, really?
Which, it was interesting. I liked it. The design of the werewolves, I'm very iffy on, but I want to go back through to see like what part of werewolf lore they actually were inspired with. Yeah. There was a lot of things in it that I thought should have been fleshed out way more than it actually was. But the story it's an interesting story. Okay. So I would recommend it. It was not a bad movie by any means. It is a slow burn. So if you go in expecting like a super flashy werewolf attack film, like you're not going to get that at all. It's a very slow burn film. So, but it was interesting. I would say it's worth like a matinee price. I would say it's worth that. All right. I went and watched the Foo Fighters movie, Studio 666, which has been a complete flop, but that was to be expected. Yeah. That movie was fucking hilarious. And I am a big fan when celebrities poke fun at themselves, poke fun at their jobs and all that. And the Foo Fighters definitely do this, especially with Dave Grohl. They poke fun at him the entire film. But my favorite thing about Studio 666, and Jake, I thought of you several times while watching it, because I was like, Jake would get the biggest kick out of this because the practical effects in it, which there are many, are ridiculous and gross, and they reminded me of like 80s style practical effects. Nice. I loved it. I was like, very minimal CGI. And it's just, it was a fun movie. I think people should go see it. It's way gorier and like gross than I thought it was going to be. Yeah. And it does not take long for that to happen. But yes, I thought it was super enjoyable. And then, oh shit, what else did I go see? Fuck. I can't remember what else I went and saw recently. Oh, crap.
I'm most excited in Studio 666 for Will Forte and Whitney Cummings. I think they're both hilarious.
So Will Forte has a very, very minimal role.
No, he's so high.
He's just
on the
not
list.
in the. He's not a main character. He's basically a cameo.
Okay.
But Whitney Cummings is hilarious in it. She plays the neighbor of the house that the band moves into. She was enjoyable to watch in the movie. I feel like it's been a long time since I've seen her do anything.
Yeah.
And I'm probably wrong about that, but I always thought she was funny. So it was neat seeing her in this. What else did I watch? I watched something else.
Did you see Dog? Did you see the outfit?
I did not see Dog. The outfit.
Did you see Marry Me?
Why would I watch Marry Me? Why?
Nothing else.
Oh, I know what the third. I know what the third one that I used a ticket on. Dude, we have the Batman coming up this weekend, so I already got my ticket for that. So I'll be seeing that on Thursday.
Yeah,
woohoo!
Ahead of me, seeing it on Friday. I'm very excited.
Fuck yeah! I'm so excited for this movie. Oh my god. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It's like I haven't been this excited for a movie since Tenet, probably.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Well, and it's funny, this is a fun segue.
Okay.
Because we can from the Batman into the episode because Colin Farrell was told by the studio. So Matt Reeves, the whole production crew of the Batman were told. And Colin Farrell tried to argue this and fought for Penguin to smoke in the movie.
Yeah.
But the studio refused to allow him to smoke.
Okay.
For fear that it would inspire younger generations to want to light up cigars.
Yeah, that's one of the things or substances, including tobacco, is one of the things that...
he had jokes of like, I don't think kids are going to go watch me in this movie and then walk out thinking, I need to light up a Cuban right away. And I agree with him. And I think it's he's a villain.
Right. It's not like
he's a gross looking villain.
What a cool hero does, and I want to be like that.
But it made me laugh when I read that because that just came out in this last week that he was told he wasn't, or that he released. Yeah, Penguin's not allowed to smoke in the film for fear of promoting.
There's also
smoking.
In the MPAA description, it says there's drug content in the film. It's like,
which means they probably talk about drugs or hint about drugs.
Yeah. If you're like, you have drug content, but you can't have tobacco content.
But you're not allowed to have smoking.
Same thing.
And that's the fun segue. So today we are having a discussion.
I'm going to stop you, sir, because I feel like you're trying to breeze over the fact of the actual standings of the draft. We need to check in with the draft. I know you're trying to jump past it because it's the first week. You're not in the lead.
I know.
I have overtaken you because Uncharted is a massive international movie, primarily. It's got like 2/3 of its budget or gross has come internationally. So you were the first to break 100,000 with Death on the Nile, but it's still at 101. Uncharted is at 226, which is now you have a grand total of 203.28 million, and I have 273.93 million. So I'm 70 million in the lead all of a sudden. First time ever. I'm very excited.
Well, you're going to maintain that lead for a while, I fear.
Yeah, you have several Marvel movies and several DC movies, which is what made me pick the Avatar movie against my will.
But none of that starts coming out until like April, May, like September.
Yeah, the lead is only going to increase through March. March is definitely my month. And so I didn't expect to be in the lead going into it, but I expected to be in the lead coming out of it. So regardless.
Well, I haven't watched it. I talked to a couple coworkers who saw, or one coworker who watched it. I'm shocked that Dog is performing pretty well. Actually, it's been number 2 at the box office for a week now.
Yeah. It's about to overtake Marry Me. Marry Me is going to be the rock around my neck. because it is not increasing in money anymore, and it's a 6.1 on IMDb. It's the lowest rated movie. Lowest rated movie overall.
Do you have our average ratings as of now?
Your average is 7.0 and my average is 6.4. You have You have 3 of the highest rated movies. The Outfit, even though there's no gross yet, is at a 7.9, which is the highest overall.
So that's helping me a lot.
Jackass Forever is 7.5, which is second highest, and Dog is 6.8, which is the third highest. So fuck you there, but
but as soon as Batman comes out, from all the early stuff I've seen of it, that movie's going to be rated at like an 8.8 minimum.
Hopefully.
That's going to skyrocket your rating.
I need the average to definitely be weighted towards the top.
Man, fuck March. God damn it.
So, needed to get that out of the way.
Yeah.
First.
We didn't because I knew that it was coming. Yeah.
Now we can segue into the episode.
He says.
So today's episode is kind of going back to our ranting about how Rotten Tomatoes works. First, explaining how Rotten Tomatoes works, because it's confusing to a lot of people. And then breaking apart, is it actually useful? Are people using it right? Does it make any sense? And how does it hurt movies or benefit movies? We wanted to do a similar discussion with the very commonly known MPAA content rating system. So as movies and even trailers are rated for certain audience acceptability, then we'll be going through and talking about kind of the history of it and landmark movies that made people change their minds and weird things in the culture that people are hung up about and all that good stuff.
Yep. The MPAA, very interesting kind of thing, diving into some of the history on it. We won't get to it yet, but there is one very big name that is like, he's one of the biggest names of Hollywood, and he's kind of directly responsible for the PG-13 rating, but not just because of a movie, but yes, because of a movie, but he's the one that actually created it. So we'll get to that in a little bit. That was interesting to learn.
Yeah.
So preparing for this, I was like, well, let's start from the beginning of when did the MPAA start? What's the actual purpose of the association? Who is a part of it? I thought it was interesting of who the board members are.
Yeah.
It's just a handful of parents.
Yeah.
Who that's their job. They get paid to watch and review and rip apart movies of stuff they find offensive. And that's where all the inconsistencies, it's where all the stupid reasonings start coming out.
Yeah, that was interesting to me to learn as well, because I always think of the rating system as something for parents, because it's generally for parents to know what's in a movie before they see it, so they know if their kids can see it or not. But I didn't know it was like that's actual overall intent, and that parents are the people viewing the stuff and noting what's in it, and then they come up with what the rating should be overall.
Which is also kind of funny to me. So the whole thing, well, I'm just gonna do a quick little rundown, very cliff notes of the history of it, because some of it, one, there's not actually a ton of history on the MPAA, but there is enough that I found interesting, especially when I found out about the board members. So the MPAA was founded in 1922. So see, the classics, even back then, were under scrutiny.
And I think I think we talked about it in our black and white movie episode.
I think we briefly
because
brought it up.
I had a couple of pre-code movies, which means that they were made before they had like censorship in Hollywood, and so there was some like more gritty stuff in them than there was in the 30s and 40s.
So it was established by major Hollywood production studios in response to increasing government censorship of films. Now, this is funny to me. So Hollywood decided to create their own system to censor their own product, which I agree with. However, some of the reasonings, I'm like, you guys are dumb. But, or at least when they come down to the ratings. But I thought it was interesting that Hollywood was all about taking control away from the government, considering these days they're all about sucking the government's dick. So,
it's true. Yeah, that's probably my favorite thing about it too, is because it is probably one of the most successful examples of a private group or private industry taking kind of self-governing themselves and saying, we understand that people need to know these things. We're going to create a body to define it and make it useful and clear. And that way it also benefits us because we can release movies all over the country and everybody kind of gets it. The big problem with the government coming in and saying, hey, if you don't fix this, we're going to pass regulations and laws that enforce your censorship, basically. The big problem with that is that they started doing that. Different states started coming up with these their own groups and their own boards and committees, and that was going to cause Hollywood to either limit their distribution, where they could only release movies in certain areas or certain states and not other states because it wasn't allowed, or they would have to spend a lot more time and a lot more money editing their movies to have a different version of the movie that would pass in Kansas than would have to go to New York, where New York is more free with their, like, because they have like Broadway and nude shows and all this stuff. But so they'd have to edit it and it'd be like a nightmare. Well,
and so on that note, although here in the States, they don't really have to do that per state here. Usually if something's got too much, a lot of the time on like the Blu-ray or DVD, now digital release, the studios will release the like unrated versions to throw in the stuff that the MPAA told them they had to cut out, which I think is funny because for the majority of movies that have a unrated from their R-rated or PG-13, there's typically nothing changed. You'll look at like the runtime and it's like, oh, unrated is longer by a minute, whatever. Then you get movies like Anchorman 2 where they're like, oh no, here's the unrated version, and instead of an hour and a half, it's almost a 3-hour cut. Where you're like, holy shit, they took out a ton. I'd prefer that. But internationally, they do have to cut films in very, very specific ways per country that it's going to be released in, because every country has a different standard. So internationally, they don't follow the like G, PG, yada yada ratings. They have their own. It's usually by like numerical. But certain countries won't allow certain things in them, and some countries will just flat out refuse a movie to even be distributed across their borders. So although we don't got to do that stateside, Hollywood still is forced to internationally, because they kind of lose control. They can't bypass all those other governments.
And they almost had to do it stateside. I think that there's a timeline where this system didn't work well enough, fast enough that they started enacting those things, and that could have very well been what we're in, where every single state had its own rules. We were going that direction so quickly, because they were very significant. Like in the 20s when this first started, there were so many like what are those things called where you are like petitions and things like there were petitions from parents. There were legislators that were like introducing bills. Like there were, I think, 100 bills introduced in 1921 where they were going to start like going down this path. And Hollywood's like, whoa, what if What if we kind of just like form a system that people can understand and benefits parents? We want it to, like, the overall goal is to benefit parents so they know what's in the movie, and it worked, which is kind of a crazy thing. But it got down to like the Supreme Court in 1915, even they had a unanimous decision in Mutual Film Corporation versus the Industry Commission of Ohio that basically said free speech does not extend to motion pictures. You can't put whatever you want in movies and call it free speech. Like, you have to. They were like, the government can control this and will control this if you don't get your shit together.
Which is nuts.
It's nuts.
That's like some borderline, or not just border. You know, it's pretty much the same thing of like the Catholic Church back in ancient days telling artists, hey, you have to you got to castrate your statues because we can't show that. You better put fig leaves all over the crotches.
Right.
You can't.
It's absurd to say that free speech doesn't extend to films when there's basically no difference between films and books. One, you imagine an image, and one, you see an image, but you're still writing. You're still the. But they've been. Decided.
It's great. We're in 2022, and they're still trying to ban books, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? How, like, banning some of this stuff? Are you kidding me? Like,
it's almost as if free speech and the First Amendment is pretty clearly written. Like, it doesn't leave any room for interpretation.
Man, if there's anything that anyone can swing to better fit like their opinion or the opinion they've been told, they've been indoctrinated to believe, they're going to swing and interpret whatever they can.
Yeah, it's true.
We should warn you guys, there's a good chance we're going to rant a handful of times because I did not realize the MPAA was put in place as kind of a buffer between government and Hollywood. And for Jake and I, anything involving government, we tend to get a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Asshole-ish. We get a little,
asshole-ish is correct.
We get a little rebellious. We get a little heated. We get a little heated when it comes to certain stuff.
Especially when it comes to censorship and very significant impact and significant overreach. Censorship is one of those things throughout history that has been damaging, and I don't think has ever benefited anybody.
Well, when you try to see, it's one of those like tricky areas. Because everyone, you can say, hey, censorship is super bad, but then you're gonna, immediately people are gonna be throwing out like, well, what if we were shown certain images, or what if like certain what if Mein Kampf was available in a school or whatnot, I get that argument, but at the same time, this kind of censorship that we've learned about, that we're kind of experiencing currently with a lot of stuff, it's not a censorship to protect public, it's a censorship to segue people. It's a censorship to try and just add more control. So I think it's better to have stuff available and learn from it as we're supposed to, opposed to hide it and just hope no one comes across it or just ignores it.
Yeah. And I'm all for, I think, the intent of this system, which is to inform people of it, because you're buying a ticket to a movie, you don't know what's in it, really. You may have seen a trailer, you may have not. It's beneficial to everybody to say, here's a movie. It generally has these things in it that you might want to be aware of because they're hot topics or what have you. That's totally fine. I don't have any issue with that. I think that it may have made even more sense culturally back in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s when the systems were less spread out. Everything was more focused on, here is Hollywood, here is the TV, you have 3 channels, and that's where the news comes from. Here is the 3 publishing houses that make books. Like everything was funneled through those things.
There was a lot more structure.
Now we have the internet where anybody can put anything anywhere at any time, and anybody can find anything at any time. And so, yes, it's beneficial to know that this is intended for adults because it has adult content and it has adult ideas and it's not for children. But that doesn't mean that means that anybody can publish Mein Kampf online, and you can find it and you can read it and you can do it, make your own decisions about it. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think it is a different world than we had in the 20s and 30s that I think the whole process is trying to adjust to. That was also an interesting thing reading more about the MPAA, is that how much it has evolved over time. Like it started out in one way, and then they've continued to make changes to it through, I think the latest I saw was like 2016 or 2017.
Which they're constantly evolving, and the 60s had a huge impact on it being forced to change, because pre-1960s it was very rigorous and very like you followed these certain rules. They weren't guidelines, it was rules or else. Into the 1960s and post, they were forced to change because society became super laxed on a lot of hot topic issues that were leading into the 50s, primarily sex and anything sex related.
Drugs.
Like drug abuse was coming. Well, they didn't call it drug abuse in the 60s. It was like, you got to let loose.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, drug use became like more popular, and society seemed to accept some of these things more. Although it's funny to say that, because they can show this kind of stuff. We can watch a movie that'll brutally show you, like brutally honest. They'll show you images, not try to hide anything, and people freak the fuck out about it. And they're like, how dare you show us this stuff? But, let's say Marvel puts out a movie. I'm going to use Black Widow as an example real quick, where the whole premise of her character was going through this program, which sterilizes young women. They are forced to do what their government is telling them. They're forced, they are not allowed to have control of their own bodies. They're not allowed to do yada, 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 right?
Yeah.
But that kind of content, that kind of intensity is widely accepted just because they put the guise of, oh, it's a superhero thing, so it's family friendly all of a sudden. I still, when I sat and watched that movie with my daughter, the whole time I was like, how the fuck do I explain this to her? Because this has to be terrifying to a young girl, especially.
Well, and I think it's also interesting. The interesting thing is there's a lot of creative ways to tell the same thing. You could show it 100% head on. This is what's going on. You could tell it in the background and not actually show it. You could imply it, which I think Marvel does a lot of, implying a lot of adult things. And kids are really good about, if you're watching something and you don't understand it, you just put it out.
Right, it just goes right over.
You're like, I don't know what that is. Discard that. Whatever that is, doesn't matter. Oh, I get it. She's a lady who fights crimes. That's great.
Right. So until she looks at you and she goes, "What do they mean that she's sterile, Dad? What did they just do to her in that room?" And I go, "Oh, well, how do I explain this process to you? Well, she can't have kids. Okay, why? They took that away from her."
They took the stork that would deliver it and shot it.
I guess that would be one way. A little cartoon PSA short of here's what happens.
Yeah. And I feel like that would totally work, because one of the things I think we'll talk about a lot is the MPAA and general rating systems seem to be at least this is an American-based system.
Yes.
So it's not like the Europe and other parts of the world seem to be more free in the sexuality and nudity parts of things. The United States has been very not free in sexuality and nudity, but tends to be fine with violence. And so violent movies are not as strictly rated as like sexuality and nudity.
Yeah.
So if you told them they just killed the stork, that the kid's like, that's fine, no big deal.
It's true. That is true. Yeah, we're gonna get into some of the like goofiness of how, man, I was so in looking up like just the MPAA in general. I came across tons of movies where it was just lists of all the silly reasons why they received the rate, and we'll get to those, but there are some doozies. I've got one of my favorites a little bit later, but we'll get to it.
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying about changing from the 20s and 30s, like the original rating system, into like the 60s and stuff, and how things got looser. I never really looked back at the Haze Code, that like original 20s, like do's and don'ts. They had like a don't list and a be careful with these list. And some of them make perfect sense. Like there's don'ts, like don't show child genitalia.
Right.
Don't show. And then there's some weird don'ts, like don't show white slavery, just white slavery, no other slavery. Don't ridicule the clergy. Whatever you do, don't ridicule the clergy.
So we should also note
they're also pretty woke, because they were like, they protected against willful offense of any nation, creed, or race, which I feel like any like enslaving them would be that, but whatever.
So we should just do a quick note. The Haze Code, for everyone, that Jake just mentioned, that's like the code that was written for the MPAA. That is their baseline. That's what they used in structuring their rating systems. So you can look it up. I forget the guy's full name, and of course I didn't write, but it was like one of the first, the one note I don't write. It was like the first guy that created this whole thing. His name was Haze. So this was like the code of conduct, if you will, his code of ethics for the corporation.
His name was Will H. Haze, president of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America.
Up until 1966, when Jack Valenti, who, if you are a movie fan or have heard anything Hollywood, watched any old Hollywood biop, you've heard the name Jack Valenti. And it was really interesting finally kind of reading about his time with the MPAA, which was for a pretty fucking long time, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so go back to the code, Jake. Sorry, should probably reiterate.
Yeah, and they had a bunch of things that you should be careful about showing. Like you can show it, or you can apply it, or you can write stories that involve these things, but just be careful about how you do it. Otherwise, it'll get flagged or whatever. And of course, it was things like rape and attempted rape and the sale of women, or a woman selling her virtue, like prostitutes. But then there was some like kind of, I guess, funny to me or telling of the time be carefuls, which was like the use of the flag and deliberate seduction of girls. It's like there was a very like 40s, 30s, 40s, 20s like kind of a mentality. The culture was a little different, but they had a lot of like, it was going in a good general direction, I think.
And I'm okay with how it first kind of came about with like, hey, here's our buffer for Hollywood to control it rather than let the government control what they're doing. I'm okay with that. I'm also very okay with it being the rating system is more in line for parents. It's not really existent for anyone over the age of 18. It doesn't really, unless you have kids. But
yeah,
I'm okay with that. And I think originally they did pretty well for quite a while with the G, which is like your general audience, the PG, which is, hey, there might be a joke or like an image that's a little more intense than what a G-rated film would get.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that. They didn't even have the full G, PG, R ratings at first. It was G, M, R, and X at first.
Yeah.
They didn't really change any of that until after 1968. So But I'm okay with that. I think it's kind of funny how back then, though, if you look at why movies were rated why they were back then, their ratings seem to be very more or a lot more structured, just very like straightforward, simple, like language. You see rated R for language, you're like, oh, they drop a lot of F-bombs. I got it.
Yeah.
I think adult content has always cracked me up because that what actually justifies as it's
yeah. That's the broadest thing ever.
It's almost like they can't come up with a valid reason, so they just went adult content. Yeah.
Yeah. That like the description part, I feel like is one of the most useful parts.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have that. They introduced that, I think, in 1990, and only for R-rated films, where they would say this has like a certain amount of nudity or a certain amount of drug use or whatever. And then since 2000, they started applying it to PG and PG-13 and NC-17 as well. But I feel like those things for people is the most useful. Like, obviously, the rating itself is the most simple. It's the fastest to be like, at a glance, is it PG or is it R? Okay, that gives me a general. And then you can get into a little more details, like, why is it R? Well, is it R for violence or R for nudity or R for sex or R for drugs or whatever? And so I think those things are definitely helpful to include more.
Yeah, and I remember it was mid 90s, late 90s, maybe even later than that, but not by much, when they started using the TV ratings. So a show would pop up and it would, up in the top left corner, it would tell you, like, I think they still do it actually, like the TV Y or TV,
14 or
TVM. I actually thought that was not a half bad idea, especially when you're looking at it from like a parental point of view of your kid wants to watch a new show. You can look at that corner and be like, oh, it's TVY7. So there might be a couple jokes that are, it'll go over their head. TVM typically meant like, oh, there's going to be what an R-rated film would come in. That's how I always took it.
Right.
So I think it's interesting that the MPAA ended up kind of stretching their fingers into television as well, but it works. But yeah,
I think it works well on television, and I know that games, going back to last week's episode, games does that a lot as well, where T for teen or M for mature, those are all very similar things. I assume that it's an industry thing that is, I don't know if it's as voluntary as movies are. That's another interesting thing to get into. But that's always kind of the interesting thing to me, is that this is a useful system that parents were wanting, that they find to be acceptable enough that they're not asking the government to do more.
Right.
About it.
So you just brought it up. One of the most interesting things I learned, it's voluntary. Production studios.
I always assumed.
I thought you had to like submit it, and it had to go through this process. It does not. You don't have to submit it, but companies do, or these studios do submit their films because marketing. It's way easier to market a rated film, no matter what rating you get, than it is to market an unrated movie. And usually the unrated movies get zero attention. They just kind of get pushed out one day and that's it. It got me thinking. I was like, I wonder if I've seen any of those. And I have. In fact, I own one. And I was like, oh shit. Very interesting to, I always thought you had to submit a movie, and you don't. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. That's such an interesting thing that it's voluntary, and the reasons that people will choose to or not to is interesting too. Like you said, that it does help with marketing, and I think that leads into the conversation about trying to get a certain rating helps you as well, where if you submit your film and you get an NC17 rating, you could leave it, or you could edit it or do different things. You could lobby. You could say, hey, could you please not give me an NC-17 rating because I feel like it doesn't deserve it for these reasons? And they might listen to you, or you can edit it and resubmit it and see what they give it after that. That happens a lot. But I dislike that generally. Like, I get it, but I think in my purest of hearts, that is like, I just want the movie to be what the filmmaker wants it to be. Obviously, I'm not a parent and I don't care what these are. Or if I was a parent, I feel like I would not just be showing my kids random shit.
Well, I feel like, and speaking as a parent, and I shouldn't generalize for other parents because every parent has their own guidelines or the parameters of what they allow their children to watch. But the kind of parent I am, if I saw that there was a NC-17 movie playing at the local theater, I would already know I'm not taking my child to see this. I personally probably won't be watching it myself because I know that the NC-17 it borderlines like a very specific line, and it typically has to do with sexuality. So it's very like, I'm probably not going to go to the theater to watch an NC-17 movie. Now, Hulu has a movie, or Netflix has a movie coming out this year. It's the Marilyn Monroe film that's coming out.
Okay.
It is NC-17, and the director refused to re-edit it. And Netflix was okay with that. So I'm very curious to see what kind of like numbers they get on that movie due to the NC-17 rating. But I do know, like, back to my original thing, as a parent, I kind of know I'm not going to I don't care why it's rated NC-17.
Yeah.
I automatically know, oh, you're the bad rating.
Yeah, it should be very clear that this is above R. It's like R. So to clarify, R is for you are allowed to see it if you're below 17 or below if you're with an adult. But if you cannot see it under any circumstances if you're below 17 with, or if you're 17 or below with NC-17.
Right. With R's, man, I saw a ton of R-rated movies without a parent or guardian when I was younger than 17. It really depends on two things. The person selling the tickets at the ticket booth, what mood they're in. And it also depends on the person tearing your ticket on what mood they're in.
Yeah, this is definitely that's one of the kind of the weird things about the system is not only is it applied by this committee and they put a rating on the movie, but that doesn't magically stop everybody who's not allowed to see it from seeing it. It's just information. But then it's supposed to be enforced by the theaters or the not distributors, the exhibitors, I think they call them. Whoever's exhibiting the movie is supposed to enforce the rating and not sell tickets or allow kids who are not allowed to see a movie to see it. And obviously they do all the time. We have seen tons of R-rated movies without adults. And that's part of growing up, honestly, in a way.
Shit, man.
But
when we were in high school, I saw Jackass, Euro Trip, Blade 2. I saw a whole bunch of these R-rated films. I wasn't 17 when I watched all these in the theater. And we went in mass groups of high school kids. High school kids are very obvious. They stick out like a sore fucking thumb.
Right. Especially when you're
in a group. You're the most obnoxious group there is. But we always like...
When your mom dropped you off.
We only had one movie where the ticket folk were like, oh, I don't know. And that was Blade 2. I'm like, Blade 2 drew the...
I feel like I first learned about this system at a theater trying to buy a ticket, and they were like, no, we can't sell you this. I was like, what? Why? What are you talking about? And they're like, it's rated R. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I know. That means that it's good.
Yeah, because as a young kid, when you saw R...
All my favorite movies are R.
Like, the coveted R rating. As a kid, like, I grew up not being allowed to watch R-rated movies, so that was like the goal, right? The R rating was coveted. Like, oh man, if I can just be allowed
it's one of your
watch
like
that.
rites of passage. It means you've grown up.
And then as an adult, now it's like, oh, this was rated R? I didn't even know. Why is it R? We're gonna get to that.
That was the first like note I took, is that I don't pay attention to ratings at all. Obviously I'm not a parent, so that's probably a big part of it, but I don't pay attention. I don't care. I'm also a weird kind of movie viewer though, where I want to watch anything. Like, I don't mind being surprised by things. I don't have any hang-ups of like, oh, it can't be this or it can't be that, or I'm uncomfortable with rape or whatever. Like, I don't really have any hang-ups, so I'll watch whatever, and as long as it's good or interesting, I'm down for it. Which is weird.
I don't have too many hang-ups. I know cult films really fuck with me. Fucking cult movies.
Well, the MPAA is not going to rate it for cultness.
No, but so they should.
Not a rating.
They should all get like an R rating for groupthink, and in parentheses it should say it's a bad thing. Stop doing this.
I'll send them a strongly worded letter.
Yeah, we should. No, we really should. I'm just fucking around. But I don't really have a lot of hang-ups. I've got a pretty tough gut. I can handle quite a bit. Rape scenes, like, I don't enjoy seeing them. In fact, I think 99.99999, fuck it, I'll just say 100% of the time you see a rape scene in a film, you don't actually have to see the rape scene in the film. That's one of those.
It's one of the most visceral subjects that you can imply it and everybody gets it.
Everyone gets it, and everyone gets the impact of it. Everyone feels the impact if you just imply it. Forcing audiences to see it, I'm actually not on board with.
You don't get that much more out of it, I don't think.
But I'm still able to watch a movie even if it has that in it. But my only hang-ups, if you will, when it comes to the rating system is like, if there happens to be a like kid-friendly movie that I'm genuinely like, oh, that looks awesome, I really want to watch that. If my daughter decides she does not want to see that movie with me, I'm not going to go to the theater and watch it, because I'm not going to be that guy sitting alone in my mid-30s, like eating popcorn at a kid movie. Just, I'm not going to be that dude.
I'll catch it on
right,
screen.
Like, I guess I'll watch it when it hits Disney Plus. Okay. So those are my only hang-ups. Other than that, it is really funny. Like, I just don't care about rating. Like, I don't care if it's R. I don't care if it's PG. I don't, like, none of that matters to me. What matters to me is, am I entertained first and foremost? Like, is it an interesting or fun enough movie? And if it hits that box, I'm like, cool.
It's funny to me, though, that you said that you wouldn't probably see an NC-17 movie. And I wanted to get more. I probably
wouldn't. I
want to get more into that, why that is. Is it because it's like adjacent to X? It's like porn adjacent? Or is it like.
Probably.
Is it like this cultural stigma? That's like a big thing that movies don't come out with an NC-17 rating, because.
I did think about this over this last week and prepping for this episode, because I was like, at first I was like, I don't think I would mind watching an NC-17 movie. Like, I wouldn't mind watching this Marilyn Monroe one that's coming out, because I'm interested on seeing a biopic about Marilyn Monroe, at least done in this style.
You watch completely
the one that came out.
You watch unrated DVDs.
Right. So I did think about this, and I was like, so why wouldn't I go watch one? Because I just immediately was like, as I'm researching, and it's like NC-17 and the next, and I was like, why wouldn't I go watch that in the theater? And that it did get me thinking, why not? And honestly, I think it has everything to do with the stigma to it. Growing up, just having that understanding of anything over R is just like as taboo as you can get. And I had to laugh at myself, because I was like, I would be okay watching it at home, but not okay going to the theater to watch it. And I was like, the only reason I can even come up with is because one can be in my private residence, and one would be like someone else would know that I bought that ticket and I'm in that theater.
Yeah.
And chances are I'm the only person that bought that ticket ever.
There are certain movies or certain subjects that I would feel less comfortable watching with a stranger sitting right next to me, with their arm basically touching mine. That's for sure.
But it also, it got me thinking of, because I have watched, I can never remember if it's actually one full movie or if they still consider it two. It got split into two parts, but I think the director still claims it as like one. But I did watch one, and it was like, I fucking hate this movie so much. In fact, I can't stand this director at all. I can't believe
Is it Baz
Hollywood.
Luhrmann?
No, it's Lars Van Trier.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of, actually.
Yeah. I don't understand the appeal to this guy.
Yeah.
Because every movie I've watched of his makes me want to just beat the ever-living fuck out of him.
Yeah.
And, like, strangle the studios that keep giving him money.
Right.
That's super violent, and obviously I literally wouldn't do that. But I feel like this dude has issues with women. And I remember watching his movie, oh fuck, I just lost the name of it. It's the Nymphomaniac.
Yeah.
Part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Those are NC17. And I remember watching all of part 1, and I don't think I ever finished part 2 because it just got to a point for me where I was like, this is just gross. And I can't believe these actors and actresses like lobby to work with him. And I don't understand it, but his style, I think I've really over the years associated his style and the way he kind of glorifies the NC-17 rating. And that might also have something to do with like why I'm not inclined to go watch.
Yeah. It has kind of become its own niche. Like I think he's fallen into the niche. He didn't create it. It kind of created itself, which is a weird thing. And it's interesting to hear your perspective, because I was thinking about it also. And I was like, I don't understand why there aren't more NC-17 movies. I don't understand why there's a stigma. On paper, it just means that it's for adults. Like only adults can see it. No one 17 and under can get into it. So you have to be 18 or over. And you just feel like there should be a lot more adult, like just adult content. That's why it's just an adult movie with adult things in it. And that seems like it would be fine. But society has decided that that's like taboo, or to the point where filmmakers and studios especially, I don't think filmmakers care, but studios don't want their movies to have an NC-17 rating. They will,
because they're not going to profit at all.
They will pressure filmmakers to edit their movies to get it into at least an R rating, because it won't get distributed to theaters as much. It won't get put on store shelves and purchased as much, and they're not going to make money on it. So I don't know if that will ever change. I feel like there's a space for an adult rating, but I think there is a stigma about NC-17, like there was a stigma about X. The weird thing is that they created NC-17 because there was a stigma around X, and they're like, we need an adult rating. Let's just make NC-17. It's for nobody under 17. It's great. And then it became the exact same thing.
Right.
But it feels like there's room for that. And it feels like there's even more room for that in streaming, where you're in the comfort of your own home. You don't have a stranger next to you. And I mean, adult content is extremely popular. Like Game of Thrones, it was extremely popular and some of the darkest content in the world. So it's kind of crazy to me, but it feels like, I mean, I view it like I would certainly watch an NC-17 rating movie as much as I would watch an unrated movie. I wouldn't let a kid watch an NC-17 rating, just like I wouldn't let them watch an R rating. Like if you can watch one, you can probably watch the next level up, or there's a age of maturity where you can graduate to the next level of. I think that's what we all went through. You started in G, eventually you got to PG, you got to PG-13 because it was there by the time we were that age. And then you graduated to R, which was like the coolest time ever. So I think there's a next level where it's like, okay, now you are a full-fledged tax-paying adult and you can watch NC-17 movies. I feel like there should be more, honestly.
It's funny saying all this out loud because I fully understand your point of view. In fact, I agree with your perspective on all of it. And I also think, like, why haven't we had more NC-17s? I feel like in these current times and I mean, like in the last, 10, 15 years, I feel like NC-17 stuff should have already been breaking the stigma, kind of getting past the taboo overlays and all that. And honestly, I don't know if it hasn't yet. Like I said, the last 15 years would have been prime time to do this, to break that stigma, to get past a lot of these taboos, just with all the changes in society, acceptance and all that. And
the whole rise of unrated DVDs, like I think that was something I never heard of unrated VHS really. And then it didn't exist.
I
saw like teen comedies come out with unrated versions on DVD, and that was a very popular thing. And I feel like you should have seen Hollywood notice that, people are snatching these up because they're so curious.
They still are.
Yeah.
They still are. That has, like, the popularity of the unrated has not diminished.
Yeah. In spite of the fact that you watch it and you're like, this is basically the same movie.
It's basically, but I'm totally guilty of doing it. Like, I'd see a movie in the theater, love it for what it was, right? It gets released on DVD, and you have the two choices: theatrical cut, unrated cut. 100% of the time, I go, well, I'm buying the unrated cut because why wouldn't I? I get to see more.
Yeah,
you don't really get more content most of the time.
However, there have been several movies where I've seen the unrated version first, and then I see the theatrical later. I'm like, this is much worse if I notice at all. Sometimes I don't notice, but when I do, I'm like, where was that joke? That was like one of my favorite jokes. What the hell?
See, okay, so that you just remind me of something though. Then all of a sudden, some of these unrated movies like started changing jokes, changing my favorite bits. And then it became very like, it created trust issues when these movies would come out for me. Because all of a sudden I'd be like, wait a minute, they may have swapped stuff. They may have changed something on me. And I'm going to be really disappointed in that. Oh no. Luckily they'll release like the duo pack, right?
Yeah.
Like, here's the theatrical and the unrated. So that helps the trust issues. But I think it is funny that some of these movies have done that, or completely changed whole scenes where you're like, wait a minute, that I remember a whole sequence that's not even on the DVD. Where the hell did that come? They're like, the studio created that only for the like theater or only for a TV airing. Here's the actual stuff. And you're like, God.
Yeah.
Movies.
It's messy.
The way movies have to be edited for so many different reasons, for so many different distributions is crazy. They've even done it with like TV shows. So Friends got released on Netflix a couple years ago, right? Huge. Everyone streamed that thing nonstop. Like the whole year it was on Netflix. But so I own like the set. I own the series. So when it released on Netflix, I was like, not a big deal for me.
Yeah.
But I found myself still streaming it.
Yeah.
Even though I owned it.
It's mildly convenient enough to change discs.
Right. But then I was noticing like jokes were different. And I remember talking to other friends being like, hey, did you notice, like, are you watching Friends? And they'd be like, yeah, they changed a whole bunch of jokes. Why? I still have yet to learn why it was changed. And then I just recently learned that The Office went through the same thing. If you watch it on iTunes, I think it is, or whatever, the Apple. Yeah, it is iTunes, right?
Yeah.
It's different than like the DVD box sets. And it's also different from the TV airing.
Okay.
So it's like, why are they editing? And it's all due to editing for content, editing for like what area is going to have more acceptance, or what don't they like about this.
I remember for Friends, especially before it was on Netflix, it was on TBS like constantly. And they edited it for time primarily, because they edited like every like little joke they edited out and then left only the big jokes. And then they filled the rest of the time with commercials. And so they had as many commercials as possible, and everybody would watch Friends, because if there's nothing on, of course, to watch Friends.
Because you watch Friends.
And so, they edited it. Well, they edited it to be widescreen, which is another thing. They blew it up and cut off like the bottom half of the screen. And then also for time was kind of the main thing. And then, they moved it to Netflix and seemed like they cut more or cut different, which is so weird.
It was so weird. But they do that with movies for several reasons, and ratings and content is the biggest reason for why things get cut and shuffled around, re-edited.
Yeah. But getting back to what you were saying, I think that if we were going to embrace NC17 or even a new no stigma adult rating, I think that would have happened, or could have happened around the time that we said that there is a market, obviously, for unrated movies. I think that there's as much of a market for adult rated movies. I feel like, especially in the time of the internet and the way media is now, you could have pretty easily formed a campaign around the fact that, oh, this movie is unrated, it's too hot to handle. Like, I don't know why theaters and distributors feel like NC-17 movies won't make money, or they don't make money. Like, they do have a track record to prove they don't make as much money, so that's why they want the R rating. But I don't understand why they don't make money, because I feel like it's very easy to say, this is a movie that is for adults. It's too hot to handle. It's one of the rare, especially now when there's not a million of them, it's one of the rare NC-17 movies, and have people be intrigued by that as opposed to repulsed by that. There was a movie I looked up, kind of like landmark movies in the rating system. There was a movie in 1971, which was like a blaxploitation film called Sweet Seatback's Badass Song. Like, it's badass, like spelled out song. And it was one of the earliest, most successful cases of an X-rated movie. And the only reason it was an X-rated movie is because the filmmaker like refused to re-edit it or appeal it, because he said that there was there's nobody on that committee that's like representative of us, of Black people and stuff. So why would I bother? But then they marketed it as this was rated X by an all-white jury, and then it became like a very successful like blaxploitation film, because it's like the man rated this X and and all that stuff. And I feel like that's a good way to market something.
They've even given the highest award in Hollywood of the Best Picture Oscar, the Academy Award, to an NC-17 movie. Wasn't it Midnight Cowboy, right?
Yeah, that's true. I know that Blue Valentine was another big one.
And Blue Valentine was a big one.
Michelle Williams was nominated for an Oscar for that, and all that stuff.
So I'm kind of shocked that Hollywood. I'm with you on this. I'm shocked Hollywood hasn't tried to release more or be open to releasing more NC-17, because when you look at it from just a basic logical perspective, which you are, it's just the next step.
Right.
So why don't they? Why aren't they profitable? I think it really simply boils down to there's such a heavy stigma. Like, they have always been regarded as taboo.
Yeah.
They are full of everything mass audiences don't want to see. I considering the only NC-17 I've ever actually watched was that Nymphomaniac film. If that is my baseline, right?
Yeah.
If that's my control in this NC-17 experiment, it's not going well.
Yeah,
That's not
that's
evident
true.
enough for me to be like, well, let's keep trying.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the case. I don't know. But Hollywood should find a way to break the stigma and maybe, like you said with that film, maybe exploit the rating. Maybe be like, this movie is this.
Yeah.
Check this out.
Right.
We are actually releasing them. Be open to it. I think more people would flock if you add a little flair to it.
Yeah. I think by not having as many movies in the NC-17 space, it leaves a vacuum for people like Lars von Trier to make it their niche and to make Nymphomaniac and other movies that like, I think he also made Antichrist, which I think is unrated. But he makes all those kinds of movies. And so that's his niche that he's made because nobody else is doing it. He's allowed to. And I honestly don't know why I understand why he wants to make the movies. I don't know why everybody else involved makes those movies.
I don't get why I really don't understand why he has a career. Like, clearly the dude has issues. If you've seen Antichrist, which that was the first movie of his I ever saw, and that made me like want to throw up. I could not believe I actually watched that whole thing. Of course, then I was a dumbass who watched Nymphomaniac. So
he wrote and directed Melancholia, which is a really good movie, but it's rated R. So he actually, I don't know if he caved to the system or that's just what the story was. I feel like that's always what I advocate for. Whatever the story is, whatever it should be, whatever the filmmaker's vision is, let it be that, and then just inform the audience what it's going to be so they can make a decision.
Yeah.
That feels like how it should be, but then they come up with this whole system of gaming the system or trying to figure out, like, trying to edit it to make as much money as possible and all this stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah. I just know I'm not a fan of his.
Yeah.
And if that's my basis for NC-17, it's not a good start. But I should not say I'm completely opposed to it because your perspective is spot on, and I agree with all of it. I think it just boils down to a hypocritical generational thing.
Yeah.
Why is NC-17 so taboo?
Mm-hmm.
Because we've always been. That's what we're taught. That's
right.
what, and I should fight that. So
I totally get that. And I think that you're not alone in that. I think probably the whole world's like that. That's why it is the way that it is. But it's so bizarre to me that we fought that when we were kids and we were like, R is the next thing that I want to see.
Right.
Or at least I'm allowed to see. There's interesting stories to tell in that space that's at a different level of content. I don't know why that stopped, where we weren't like, NC-17 has the next level of like the next more room for the creators to make content, and we just never graduated, which is kind of a weird thing.
It just, R was like the tip top, but it actually isn't the tip top.
Yeah.
And I just haven't, I mean, they don't really release any NC-17 stuff, so there's not much up there.
You're not missing out. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know, dude. I kind of feel like if they haven't worked at breaking that taboo in the last 15 years, I don't see them actually trying in the future. Now, I could be totally wrong, and that would be fine. That would be cool to see that taboo, that stigma get completely shattered. That would be a neat thing to see.
Yeah. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to change. And I say that because I don't know what they could do to make it change. Like I would
because let's face it,
I would say drop the NC-17 and make a new rating, but they've already tried that and it didn't work. It did the exact same thing where they're like, well, let's drop X and make NC-17, and then everybody applied the same taboo to NC-17. So I don't think that would solve anything. I think it's just the way it is, and until enough filmmakers come through and make good movies that make people not care what is rated,
Yeah.
I mean,
and I also
not
wonder
care in the sense that it's whether it's R or NC-17, it doesn't matter.
I also can't help but think that when it comes to like the NC-17, the filmmakers that are making the rating, I think they are immediately falling into kind of the traps of like the X-rated, whether it's on the hypersexualized or hyper. It's weird saying hyper violent, considering there are certain R-rated movies that have been released that are very like, oh my god, why is this in this movie? Who would in their right mind write this down? So it's weird, but I know that hyper violence can also bleed into NC-17 and even X, which was something like learning about the MPAs. This is all part of what they're looking at and going into. But I think these filmmakers that fall into the NC-17 trap go into it almost with the mindset to, well, I'm going to show this. I'm going to have a real depiction of like rape, but clearly there's consent, but we're going to film it in such a violent way that it's very real, actually. And I think they get stuck in that, like, ooh, I'm going to do this because I can, instead of just focusing on just make a picture. Yeah. And maybe that's why it's okay to stop at R, because you can just make the motion picture, just make the film. Like, don't get stuck in this trap. And filmmakers get caught up in that in R-rated stuff all the time, too. It doesn't really matter. And even on the reverse side, filmmakers get caught up in trying to dumbing down their content to get a lower rating. That happens more often than not.
My favorite thing, one of the funniest things, is how they try to, like, some filmmakers, I think it's a very small amount, but I've heard of this happening, where they will submit a movie to the committee that's like way worse than what they're actually trying to get. And it's kind of like raising the bar. Like, if you put the bar as high as possible, then they'll edit it a little bit and it'll bring it down a little bit, but it's still, if the normal R line is like here, it's still above the normal R. And they'll get it brought down enough by just taking out a couple of things that the people are like, well, you made it better, so we'll bring it down, even though it's still above where it normally is.
One of my favorite examples of this, and apparently this is very common for studios to do, where they will purposely film, like, filmmakers will purposely put scenes in their films they know are getting cut. They know the MPAA is going to reject this, but we're going to film it. We're going to put it into this cut, knowing it's gone, so that we can trim this down to what we actually want, which is kind of fun. Yeah. Kind of like, good on ya. Also, what a waste of money.
Yeah. And time and effort.
Production time. Like, are these what these reshoots constantly are? Oh crap, we got to film the scenes that we know are going to get cut. But one of my favorite examples of directors in the studio doing this is actually with the movie Sausage Party.
Yeah.
So Seth Rogen has told this story several times. If you don't know, if you've never seen Sausage Party, it's not for everyone. I think it's fucking hilarious. A lot of people do not. You people are crazy, but to each their own.
Probably a lot of people went into it not knowing what it is.
And then, which, I mean, it's a Seth Rogen R-rated animated comedy. Yeah. You should know there's gonna be boundaries pushed and fucking shattered.
Yeah. I think people
but
associate animated with children, and so it's hard to have an adult animated thing.
So they purposely made a ton of content that they were like, this is getting rejected, but we're okay with that because here's our R-rated cut that we're aiming for. And they did all this extra effort, and then it turns out that the MPAA only had issue with one thing in that movie, and that was there was some pubic hair on one of the characters that they felt needed to be removed. But they were okay with, are you ready for this? The excessive orgy. That was part of the added stuff to be cut out of the film. But they were okay with that stuff. They were not okay with some pubes on a fucking, I forget what kind of food the dude is, but the Middle Eastern guy, like
animated food.
Yeah.
The thing that always gets me is like the condom on the road that talks to him.
Yep.
I'm like, how did this movie get made?
And every time I watch it and that scene comes up, I always hear Christy in the theater. What the fuck are we watching?
Exactly.
Every time. I can't watch that movie without like just reliving sitting next to her and you watching that film. You and I are laughing and Christy is just in like agony and shock.
Disbelief that they could even make this movie.
But that's my favorite example of like inconsistency with the MPAA, because honestly that orgy is wild. It is so bad, and it goes on for so long. To know that they were okay with that simply because it was animated food,
right?
The actions are still there. They those positions are still
doesn't leave
there.
Anything to the imagination, really.
There's it's basically watching porn at that point in the movie where you're like, oh, this is what they're doing. To find out that they were okay with that, this board of parents, but were like, ooh, you know what? Excessive hair. We need to take that out.
Right. Yeah, it's such a bizarre... The system is based on opinion, and I don't know, it's not consistent. That's probably the biggest critique of the whole system, is that it's not consistent. And what one person finds offensive, the next person won't. And so you get weird notes like that, where it's like, you need to cut this out and this out. This is fine. And it doesn't make any damn sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
And the main things that they like check for, we can go through that. So violence, obviously, although violence, like we said, is probably the least scrutinized. I would say that they have like a standard. So they try to keep a minimum amount for G-rated and not intense violence for PG-rated and all this stuff. And
unless it's the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Oh my God.
Yeah.
How that movie pulled off a G rating is still like baffling.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like, I know that a lot of people were perplexed that The Passion of the Christ, which has some of the most intense, brutal, realistic violence ever, got a PG-13 rating. And so they do take some like...
I thought that was rated R.
I thought the theatrical...
It's got to be rated R. PG-13. Isn't it the like highest, like most profitable R-rated movie?
That might be true. You may have caught me in a fib.
But I think I know what you were meaning with The Passion of the Christ, though, because I think originally it was supposed to be PG-13.
Yeah.
Because it was a realistic depiction of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, which is like every child of whatever. I mean, as far back, we were both raised in church-going homes. Jesus being crucified, that's like an image you were pretty much born seeing.
Yeah.
Parents always had the crucifixion on the walls. You just knew the story.
It seems like the committee definitely does give certain allowances or based on context. And so because it is one of the most popular stories of one of the most popular figures of all time, that they perhaps allowed a lower rating than what it actually was. I was wrong. What I was trying to say is that it was an R rating, but a lot of people felt it should be NC-17, including Roger Ebert, who said that this movie proved that they would never give an NC-17 rating just for violence because that's all that's in the movie, but they felt that it was so strong that it should be. Or
I mean,
because it's a historical religious film. If it was anybody else besides Jesus, then it definitely would be an R-rated or an NC-17.
I think had it been anyone except Jesus, it would have been like either ixnayed right out of the gate or NC-17. No one ever would have seen it. It is hyper violent. It's very realistic violence. I remember there were certain scenes in that movie that, like, I don't cringe a whole lot to film, but that movie has a couple scenes in it that made me like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Now I'm not super critical of that film. Like some people get it depicted a story that's from the Bible.
I'm not critical of the film, but I think it's important to talk about as far as ratings go, because it was R and not NC-17. Any kid of any age can go with a parent. And there were a lot of people that took their kids to it because it's a Jesus movie.
And there were a lot of parents out there that felt their kids needed to see it. And that, I know the church going population is super high, and there's different standards. Being a parent again, so my daughter is way more spiritual than me. Like, for people that have been listening to us long enough or know me, I'm not spiritual like at all. I'm not religious at all. My daughter definitely is. Like, she's very curious about that stuff. Her mom and stepdad, they're faith-based. So she's around this stuff. So she's pretty, like, she believes that Jesus was there, yada, yada. Okay. But it's gotten me wondering, because she knows the story of the crucifixion and all that.
Right.
Would she watch this movie? Would I be okay with her watching Passion of the Christ? Now, when I saw it at that time when it came out, no. Now, because she is growing up, she's getting older, her watching R-rated films, I'm way more okay with.
Right.
And considering that's a story she knows, and she knows that it's violently depicted in the Bible, so the movie's obviously going to be violently depicted as well, and it is.
Right.
I think, honestly, she would say she doesn't want to watch it just on her own terms because she doesn't like super hyper violent stuff. But I mean, when it comes, it's so weird. And I guess this is where I have to give a little grace with the MPAA on why they're inconsistent, a little bit of grace, because there's always this gray area. And I'm going to keep using Passion as the example because so many faith-based families felt their children needed to see this movie because it's an important film for them. For them, it's a historical film.
Right.
So they feel it's important for the children to see the story get depicted out in a movie form, because movies are, I mean, they get history wrong all the time, but it's a good way to show history or show certain aspects of life to younger crowds or to people in general.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, I don't know that I would want my daughter to watch that.
Yeah.
Well, which is a hypocritical thing for me to say, because there's some movies that I'm like, oh, you can totally watch that. And it's like way more inappropriate.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to talk about it in a specific example, like you and your daughter and people that you know and what they're able to do, and talk about it in a broad example of this system that's set up for everybody in the country of a certain age, and if that's acceptable or not. At a certain point, it doesn't matter what it's rated too much because it's not really enforced very strictly. Like it's enforced by theaters sometimes, kind of, mostly. But once it leaves the theater and it's on your shelf as a DVD, or it's on a website on Amazon and anybody can buy it, or on Netflix and anybody can press play, it doesn't matter really what it's rated.
even when these sites have age confirmation,
Yeah.
like this isn't movies, but if you go to like a beer website,
Right.
it brings up the prompt. Are
Yeah.
you 21 or older?
Yeah.
There is nothing actually enforcing anything.
Yeah.
You literally just go, yep, and
Yeah.
that's it.
As if someone who is 12 has not learned that if you scroll down on the year that you could put in your birth year, you'll get in. It doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So is the rating system just completely like
It's not completely.
unnecessary?
I think it's just advice. I think enforcing it is unnecessary. I think enforcing it is ridiculous. I think that especially if you get to the point of punishing theaters for not enforcing it, that's ridiculous. I think it's a recommendation. I think if you recommend that here's what's in it, here's who we recommend should be the audience for it, here's who it's made for, that kind of thing, that's totally fine. I think that in the Passion example, where it is important for some people to take their kids to see it, and it's up to them and it's up to those kids and their relationships with their parents to know if they're ready or if they're able or if they'll get value out of it or whatever. I can't decide that. I can't say you're not allowed to see this movie because I've never met you and I don't know what your maturity level is and I don't know what your religious values are and I don't know anything, but I'm going to decide arbitrarily based on your age that you're not mature enough to see it. I can't say it. I don't think anybody in the committee should say it. So I think it's just a recommendation that generally you should do this and generally here's what's in it. You decide for yourself kind of thing, which I like.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna totally out myself with some hypocrisy.
That's good.
Because this is what we are as humans. We're hypocritical in absolutely every aspect of life.
It's true.
If you say you're not, you're full of shit and you got to reevaluate a lot of things.
Yeah.
All right.
I stopped listening to you immediately.
So I just got done saying, like, I don't think I would let my daughter watch Passion of the Christ because it's super hyper violent and I just don't think she would be able to handle it.
Yeah.
That being said, I think it's very important for my daughter to watch like Saving Private Ryan because it's pretty historically accurate just in the depiction of World War II, of the storming the beach and what the combat was like back then. I want her to watch this movie. I want her to see Schindler's List because this happened. This is what these people went through. I think those are very important, and I think she needs to watch them. Same with like Glory, Gettysburg. So I have to laugh at myself and be like, you're all right with her watching war films that are, they're very violent. They're very realistic. They are known for stirring people's emotions and making people uncomfortable, but you're not okay with her watching a guy get crucified. And I honestly don't know the difference. And I don't know why, if it's just a bias thing or what, but
well, I would say Passion of the Christ is more violent than Saving Private Ryan. Like, even if I'm just like looking at the numbers of like, if I'm autistically looking at how violent each movie is and completely unbiased, I do feel like Passion is more violent than.
Really?
I would say so. I think that, but I think.
Is it just because it's more like torture based?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that it's just more prolonged and specific to a certain person that you are emotionally attached to, as like telling the story of that person. I think the Passion of the Christ is a good example because even if you don't view it as a religious movie, like those other movies, like Schindler's List and all of those, it is a story about what human beings are capable of doing to another human being. It's not like some fantasized, hyper violent, like made up story. History was literally this violent to human beings. So like, it's extremely like grounded in reality. It's just that children should not be exposed to the horrors of reality at a certain age or until they're mature enough. So I think that it's fine to expose children to it at the time that they're mature enough to handle how serious and terrible the world really is.
Right.
And what people are capable of.
I was just thinking of that. I'm like, man, that's kind of like a huge hypocritical little thing for me to be like, oh no, you can watch like them storm the beach and get shot up and watch a guy holding his intestines crying for his mom.
Yeah.
You can't watch a guy get nailed to a cross.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, that's a close-up shot of the nail going through his wrist. So that's a little...
I think, and I've never been on one of these committees, but I think that there's a lot of things that go into it. And hearing you talk about it, one of the thoughts I have is you as the audience in that film are emotionally empathetic towards that character, and you are focused on that character for so long, the whole movie, basically. Yeah. Whereas the guy on the beach at D-Day, you see him for 5-10 seconds and then you move on and you never see him again. So it's horrible, but it's short. And this is horrible, but really long. Like you are invested, you are there, and it's really long.
It is a pretty long one. I have started thinking, like, I think it would be an interesting thing to be on the board for the MPAA.
Yeah.
To be responsible for dealing out these ratings, and for whatever reasons. I would be curious, and this is one thing I couldn't find, was like the recent boards. All I kept seeing was that it's constantly like parents.
Yeah.
Always parents. Only parents. Maybe that should get shook up a little bit. Maybe it could be like
that's
a few parents and a few like non-parents.
Yeah. Why do you say that?
Kind of try to find a more neutral ground, because as a parent goes in to review these movies, they're automatically going into these movies with the intent to nitpick, to like not necessarily enjoy the story for what it is or understand the story for what it is, but to look for
focus.
That's offensive to me. That's offensive to me. So I wonder if the board needs to be rattled a little bit.
That's a really interesting idea. I had honestly never considered that. I accepted the fact that it's made up of parents for the purpose of rating these things for other parents to be able to tell if their kids should see it. But I don't think that's a bad idea. I think that's a really interesting idea, honestly, where yes, this rating system is for parents to help them know what's in a movie, but these rating systems obviously impact everybody. Like everybody who has seen a movie or hasn't seen a movie because it didn't come out in their area because it was a certain rating or whatever, is affected by the rating. And so it would be interesting to see kind of a more neutral list of people on the committee. That would be certainly interesting, I think.
Yeah.
I never thought of that as even an option, honestly.
I don't know that it would be an option, but I think it would be interesting. I really do.
I do too. It's crazy.
So getting back, I came across this website, or this article. I'm going to try to pull it up. Give me a second. Where it was like a complete breakdown of ratings and the inconsistencies and kind of what it's titled, like "What's Wrong with the Ratings."
Okay,
we can link it in our description for this episode. But it's from a website of the Center for Media Literacy, and it's a very interesting article. When I was reading it, it's super long, and it breaks down so much of like age division, the context of violence. They have that where violence actually gets like broke down into subcategories, and how the board actually doesn't take into consideration what you were saying of maturity levels for children, because every child is different.
Yeah.
I know some children who their maturity level, at like age 10, they're still not able to watch a movie that's like PG-13.
Yeah.
They just can't cope with that. And at the same time, I've met like 9-10-year-olds who are watching like R-rated stuff that's even got me going, oh my God.
Yeah.
But the article is really interesting. We'll post the link in our thing.
Yeah, I found it just by Googling what's wrong with the Ratings Center for Media
Oh, okay.
Literacy.
Yeah. Huge article about all this. It's a very interesting one. I would highly recommend people check it out. It's written by Barbara J. Wilson. She's got a PhD. She's a professor and head of the Department of Speech Communications at the University of Illinois. That's a huge fucking title. God damn.
That title reminded me of something I was going to say before you came up with your crazy idea, which is I didn't have the idea that we should put non-parents on the board, but I did wonder how many of those people on the committee actually like movies. How many of them are movie fans that care about the medium and want them to be generally good or want filmmakers to make good movies? Like if you just pick some random person who watches a movie once a year and doesn't really care and sees them as such a arbitrary or like not meaningful thing, then
sorry, there was like a weird sound in my headphones. I was like, what the hell was that?
Then I don't think that person's opinion matters as much as someone who cares about children's awareness or parents' awareness for their children and cares that the movies are made in a way that the filmmakers want.
Well, so you brought that up, but I also think because in prepping for this episode, I went into it being all like, fuck the MPAA, learning about everything and kind of diving in. I'm more like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of support a lot. I wish they weren't so inconsistent, but I get it. I support them for the most part. But I do think I can't help but wonder if they don't go into it with any enjoyment, because their job is to nitpick the film. Their job is to point out everything offensive, everything they don't like in it.
Yeah. It's like you can't be a movie fan
and do that.
Yeah.
Right. An unbiased jury. Now, I have not had jury duty.
Well, I've had it 3 times.
I know. But I always find it an interesting concept to try and find the non-bias, because I'm like, I have never met a human being that is non-biased on harder subjects.
Yeah. Anything in life. Yeah.
People are biased. It's our nature to be biased with something. That's why it's so hard to change people's minds and their opinions.
Right.
You really can't do it.
Yeah, anybody who has any life experience has a bias.
Yeah, so non-biased is always a funny thing to me, and I don't think you can find a non-biased jury, a completely non-biased jury, just like I don't think you can find a completely non-biased board, set of board members for this kind of system. Especially since you have to pick people you hate movies, right? Yep. All right. You're hired. You hate celebrities. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Fuck those guys. But the MPAA, as much as I kind of feel for it and still have support for it, I think there's still a lot wrong with it. But I also wonder if it's one of those things where it is what it is. And I'm sure the system for it will continue to change, but they come up with some goofy things.
Yeah. And I think,
for sure.
I think that we hear more about the things that are inconsistent than we hear about the consistencies. It's one of those things that if the system's working well, you don't hear about it and you're like, it's rated R, nobody disagrees, no big deal. But then you hear about the movies that they are way off, or they were focused on this little thing and they gave it a rating when it generally probably didn't deserve it. You hear about the inconsistencies and judge it for that more, probably, I think.
Well, So there's a whole bunch of movies where people have like judged why it got rated the way it got rated. One of the more popular ones is the first Matrix movie. There's like almost zero profanity in the whole movie. I think they say like shit once. Maybe a damn is thrown into there. Yeah, I think Trinity says damn it. Or no, she says son of a bitch. Okay, she says son of a bitch. The violence in the first Matrix, though, is actually not like excessive. It's not even all that bloody. You see Neo spit up a little bit of blood.
It's like
it's set in like
traditional Hong Kong movie, like kung fu violence.
Yeah, and even like the gun battle scenes are not hyper violent. They're pretty quick. And they're super stylized.
Yeah,
so that the violence does not come across as like overbearing. It's you watch more of like straight on shots of them firing guns than you see people up close getting shot. But the Matrix received a rated R. It was rated R for violence. But then like, I just drew a blank of like a PG-13 movie that's way more violent. There's so much. Pick any PG-13 action movie,
right?
And it's way more violent than the first Matrix.
Yeah.
Now, the Matrix's release, I remember when this happened, and I didn't get to really dive farther into it this week because I got caught up with work. Freaking work schedules, man. But I do remember when it was coming out, there was a big story going around of why it got the R rating, and it had everything to do with a very tragic real life situation that had happened close to the release of it, and that was Columbine.
Okay.
And I remember the news talking about the Matrix being given the R rating because of the lobby shootout scene, because they're walking into this lobby wearing trench coats, completely armed and shooting the place up.
The trench coat thing, I feel like parents had to have focused on the trench coat thing. They're like, he's carrying guns under a trench coat. Not cool. That's total Columbine like shit.
Yeah. And because of real world events, it affected the rating of that movie. Now, I've also heard that wasn't why in recent years, but I didn't get a chance to really dive into that any further. But
it's hard to find another reason why it could possibly be rated R.
Right. It's the one that makes the most sense because, I mean, you and I, we just did a whole Matrix deep dive not that long ago, so we recently have watched it.
Yeah.
And every time I watch it, I'm like, this is such a PG, like, it's a PG-13 movie.
Yeah. That
just got slapped with the R rating. Maybe they should have given it R rating for like it's too smart for your general, like for everyone.
That is, I literally wrote that note down while you were talking because I was like going through the list. They always consider violence, they consider language, they consider sex and nudity and like substances like drugs and stuff. But nobody ever thinks about, is a movie too complicated for children to even understand? And then it should be a higher rating. And that was the only thing I thought. I was like, The Matrix is so complicated and so like adult themed or adult. I don't even know what you would call that. It's not adult content in the way you think of adult content, but it is for adults to think about as ideas, that it's complicated, too complicated for kids. So maybe it should be R-rated. I don't know.
Just for being like, it's too smart. It just is. In that vein, Tenet should have been rated R for it's even too smart for for adults. Like,
I can't imagine watching that as like a 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid and having any idea what's going on.
Dude, I kind of want to get my daughter to watch Tenet just so that when it ends, I can look at her and be like, how broke is your brain now? Yeah. She probably would go comatose halfway through.
About. I want you to tell me what that movie is about.
I want you to be able to tell me exactly how it moved. Do it.
That's funny.
We joke. We were big fans, fans of Tenet. I was listening to the soundtrack the other night at work. I love that movie. It still hurts the brain so much.
It's a lot to keep up with. And not for children, I wouldn't say.
Not for kids. Just because it's smart.
Yeah.
It's super smart. Well, we should get into some of the funny okay, before we do, we got to share the story of
PG-13 story. Yeah, it's a good story.
And then we'll get into like the funny rating reasons and inconsistencies.
Yeah.
So for our generation, PG-13 just seemed to always exist. And I think even for like my daughter's generation, it just always existed. And that's not the case. PG-13 did not exist until the mid 80s.
Yeah.
It was always PG to R, and PG was just kind of like parental guidance. Like, hey, there's content in this movie that maybe not every kid should see, but it was still looked at as family friendly, if you will.
Yeah.
So then the world gets introduced to the greatest adventurer of all time to this day, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's PG. People love it. Families love it. It's super adventurous. You're solving riddles and puzzles. It's awesome. Finding ancient relics.
Mm-hmm.
And then they made the sequel, Temple of Doom.
Mm-hmm.
PG.
Right.
It was PG. And parents
it wasn't
lost. It wasn't R. And parents lost their shit. I kind of don't blame them.
Yeah.
Because watching a human sacrifice, watching a guy eat a heart, watching like child slavery, children being whipped and beaten in this cave.
Yeah. It's a measurably darker movie and is in the mid 80s, the height of the satanic panic, and it has like dark magic in it. And, yeah.
Like parents lost their fucking minds over Temple of Doom. And even George Lucas has been like, yeah, it was a little dark. He's talked about the whole movie's like a giant metaphor for his broken heart during his divorce. And I'm like, God damn. Like, I went through a divorce. It sucked real bad. I didn't even like come up with that kind of dark. Yeah. I'm not sacrificing humans and eating their hearts and possessing people. Okay.
Enslaving children. Yeah.
In enslavement. Damn. But parents lost their shit, and I get it. I honestly get it. If I was a parent in the 80s, like you said, during the satanic panic that was going on, and I took my young kid to watch this adventure, and I got dark magic, like heart-eating people, I would probably be a little upset too.
Yeah.
So originally, like this became a whole thing. Like this was in front of a committee. This was almost brought in for like, I want to say it was almost put in front of the Supreme Court. If not, it actually was over the rating of Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
And initially parents were out. The outcry was put an R rating on this movie.
Because that's all they knew.
And Steven Spielberg, who everyone knows. If you don't know him, what are you doing listening to this show?
Why are you listening to a movie podcast?
But Steven Spielberg, who we've always known as like, he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. That's how he's always going to be known. He's one of the best storytellers. He's great.
Yeah.
What I never really knew was he is directly responsible for PG-13 rated movies.
Yeah. He's
the one that created it.
Right.
So he told the studios, he told like the committees and all that although Temple was super dark, it didn't warrant an R rating because compared to the R rated movies of that time, which were more consistently rated that way and correctly rated that way.
Right.
As dark as Temple got, it did not stack up to those others. So he created the compromise of, why don't we just add like a number to the rating where it could be PG? And he listed off like 4 of them, 13 through 17, saying we could pick an age.
Yeah.
And you can that will be the new rating. And the committee actually agreed with him and decided. Now, this is what cracks me up was he gave them several options and they went with the youngest option.
Yeah, that was your mistake, Mr. Spielberg.
And so in 1986, the PG-13 rating was created, and 3 months after Temple of Doom was released, it maintained its PG rating in theaters. I think now it has a PG-13 if you buy it, if I remember right. Or maybe it still maintains PG. Anyways. 3 months after the PG-13 got created in 1984, Red Dawn was released, and that Red Dawn is the first official PG-13 movie ever released.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of interesting.
It's wicked interesting. Yeah, Temple of Doom is still rated PG on IMDb.
Oh, it still maintains the PG? Okay.
Must be, yeah. I didn't even know that Red Dawn was the first PG-13 movie, although I did watch it this last week because Russia invaded Ukraine, and I was like, what a great time to watch Red Dawn. And
now, did you watch the original or did you watch the remake that no one else saw?
You're goddamn right I watched the original. What the fuck are you asking me that question for?
I knew you were going to say that. I was laughing. Did you not see me laughing?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
I don't even think I never saw the remake. I don't even think it was about Russia invading anything. I think they changed it to like North Korea.
I did watch it. It wasn't terrible. It had Chris Hemsworth and the guy who plays Batman's dad, Thomas Wayne, and the guy who's in Walking Dead. Doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It's not terrible, but it's obviously not as good as the first one. Rewatching Red Dawn, by the way, sidebar, that movie's fucking great. I forgot how incredible that movie is, and it's not just because I'm living through it right now, but also I'm not living in Ukraine. I'm not actually living through it, but it's relevant to current events. It's such a good movie. I am embarrassed it's not on my top 10 war movies because it's shockingly good. And it's also, it's kind of fun that it takes place in Colorado because I'm like, I feel like I get it.
This last week, I haven't rewatched it, but I have definitely been like, maybe I should watch Red Dawn. And then I'm looking at all my movies and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to rewatch Air Force One. So I watched that. And I was like, yep. I was like, should I just watch every Bond movie made? Should I do a Bond kick right now? I feel like this week is just really ramping up, like Russia's the bad guy.
Unrelated to Russia, but since you brought Bond up, I was going to text you and I forgot, so I'm going to tell you now on the show. I saw an article about how Christopher Nolan, like all of his inconsistencies in movies, or not inconsistencies, but like his unpopular opinions in movies.
Yeah.
And one of them is that his favorite Bond is Timothy Dalton, and his favorite Bond movie is...
Don't say it.
On the one with George Lazenby. What the fuck's that called?
Oh my god! I knew you were gonna say it.
The one I had on my list that I totally am blanking on.
I know the one that you love. That I don't like that
on His
movie
Majesty's Secret Service. Is that it? On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Yeah.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
That's his favorite Bond movie of all time. And I feel like if Christopher Nolan is right, then I am right, and I am vindicated.
I have no good comeback.
He has some really fun. I should
sad.
Send you that article because he has some bizarre, unpopular opinions. Like for someone that you hold in such high esteem as a purist of film, he's like, I don't care that people watch movies on tablets and phones. I don't care that George Lazenby is the best Bond movie of all time. Like he's so funny.
You should send me that article, man. I as soon as you were like Bond and Nolan with unpopular opinions, I was like, this motherfucker's going to throw this at me. I know it. I know this is happening.
Yep. It's a good Bond movie.
It's okay. It's okay. You know what? Jake? No one's perfect.
Not even the great Christopher Nolan. Or me, for that matter.
But so we're just gonna skip past Jake trying to throw that in my face, and that's the story of PG-13, folks. I always find that really interesting. I do want to rewatch Red Dawn, not just because of current events going on, but because now I want to revisit what the first PG-13 actually looked like.
Yeah.
Because memory serves with like action style PG-13. It hasn't really, the structure of it hasn't really changed, or acceptance of violence hasn't really changed. If anything, they've gotten more lax on what is acceptable in a PG-13 violent scenario, because there's some that are like pretty brutal. I mean, Casino Royale, we'll stick with Bond for a second.
Okay.
Casino Royale has a whole torture scene.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's no, but it's a torture scene.
Right.
And it's PG-13. In fact, no one even argues.
Involving testicles. Everybody knows it involves testicles.
Yeah. But it's okay. It's viewed as okay. I mean,
The Hunger Games is a big example because The Hunger Games came out.
I can't believe I didn't think of that. Oh my God.
It came out, it's PG-13, it's dystopian, has very violent deaths involving children, teenagers that die.
Children, they hunt and kill each other. It's battle royale, but with kids.
Yeah. Like the subject is very adult. I think they film it or edited it in a creative way, but it's an adult movie. That is a very interesting one to put against Bully, which came out the same year. If you haven't seen Bully, it's a documentary about kids getting bullied. Like it's a movie for teenagers, about teenagers, and it got an R rating because they say the F word a couple of times. Yeah, but it's such a
Bully is a rough movie to get through, by the way, folks. Especially if you were on the other end of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's a very relevant documentary, but it's a rough one just because of what you see. But yeah, I think that
it's a weird thing to like protect children from the thing that children are experiencing. Like to say, this is an R-rated movie, you're not allowed to experience it unless you're 18. But it has to do with children who are in school, who are 10, 12, 13.
Who go to school, who use foul language.
Yeah,
and
experiencing this thing
firsthand. Like my daughter will try to not curse around me sometimes, or she'll be like, I don't cuss. Every time. Kid, I know you get with your friends when like I'm not around, when your mom, stepdad aren't around, and you guys probably just let loose. And she gets all like, yeah, like, I know because I did the same thing.
Yeah.
My friends did the same thing.
I was there. I did that. It was very liberating. I get it.
But I do think it's ridiculous that Bully was rated R, considering that's probably one of those like documentaries, subjects, whatever, should have gone unrated first off, just to be like a document, like, hey, kids. Hey, adults, you should probably be watching this with your kids. Whereas, Hunger Games. Now, I'm a big fan of the Hunger Games series. I read the books. They're like the only young teen books that I've read and enjoyed. I still argue, who the fuck thought it was a great idea to market this story?
Yeah.
Now, this is from a fan.
Yeah.
To market this story for kids.
Right.
What?
It's like darkest story. Like if you just see it on paper, it's the darkest story ever.
Like you have kids throwing hatchets into each other. You have kids hunting each other down and killing each other slowly because knife wounds, cuts, stab wounds, you don't die immediately like they show you in the movies. That is a long drawn out bleed out.
Right.
Hunger Games is the fact that it got a PG-13 rating, all of them, is only due to the fact that the books were released as like young teen novels. And that's the only reason it got the PG-13.
Yeah.
Had it been its own story, I honestly think it would have been rated R, especially like the last one, just for the depictions of violence all involving kids.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. I think that you're probably right. They needed to capture the target audience, which is teenagers, because that's what the books were marketed to. So if you rate it higher than them, you're not going to get as many of them to go see it. And so that's definitely a big problem. There was a similar problem with The Exorcist. It got an R rating in the 70s before PG-13 even existed. And people were freaking out back then. They were like, well, you see all these stories about people vomiting and passing out in the theaters and freaking out about while they're watching it. And then there was so many petitions that they were like, this should be an X rating. It shouldn't be R, not at all. And they feel like there's like speculation that because the movie was so expensive to make, they spent $10 million on it, that they got the rating system to give it an R rating instead of an X rating, because they would never make their money back. They would never make a profit if it was rated X. So that
might be true. I don't think The Exorcist warrants an X rating, even an NC17 rating.
Yeah.
Even though there are a couple scenes in that story that are a little like, what?
Yeah.
But I blame Linda Blair's parents more than anything for
right. I was
how
like,
gross that movie
I was
gets.
like, no way should that be an NC-17 rating. And I was like, well, there is a scene about a 12-year-old possessed girl masturbating with a crucifix. So yeah, maybe it should be an NC-17 rating.
There is that. There's also where she grabs her mom's head and shoves it into her crotch and tells her to lick her.
Yeah,
that
kind of get it then.
I kind of get it.
But the fact that
but I would say more so in line with the NC-17, not an X rating.
Well, X was NC-17 at the
but
time.
X was yeah.
But the fact that it is, I guess that is, even though I'm a fan of the industry policing itself, that is a thing to be aware of, or for the audience to be aware of, that even though it's a separate entity, the committee or the Motion Picture Association of America, they are in the industry and they are deeply impacted by whether these movies succeed or fail. So if you have a very expensive movie that gets a rating that doesn't get distributed, that doesn't make any money, that there's incentive to not do that, or pressure from other studios or future work or whatever to not do that.
The impact is pretty vast, because it's not just the studio making back the production price, right?
Yeah.
But if a movie is a complete failure, and what I think a lot of audiences don't understand is if a movie completely bombs at the box office, in the studio's eyes, that potentially means that the writer, the director, the co-producers, and the cast as a whole are potential duds, which means that a flop at the box office could cost the jobs of a whole crew.
Not just jobs, but careers.
Careers. And crews on movie sets are in the hundreds.
Yeah.
So, and this is where like greedy studios kind of starts coming into play, because I understand they need their money, but I always hate it when you see complete careers get just ruined because of one flop.
Yeah. Flops are a big deal in that way.
Yeah. So if you didn't realize that and you're wondering, where do all these actors that show up that you think are going to be big and then they vanish, it's probably because they had a flop at some point and no one wants to hire them anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're not seen as profitable.
Cuba
which
Gooding
starts
Jr.
a whole nother ramp. So, but we're going to try and maintain it just to the
different
MPAA.
episode. I don't know,
but it is crazy how the rating, the MPAA, does actually have a ton of power, over so much, and it's just this very small board of parents,
right?
And it's kind of crazy how much control they actually end up having.
It's pretty crazy. I don't know if you want to talk about specifically sex and nudity. I feel like that's a big topic in the whole puzzle.
We can.
Especially as
I think it used to be way more well defined than it is these days.
Yeah. I was shocked to learn that the MPAA does not have any explicit criteria for sexual content other than excluding sex scenes from G-rated films. I was like, weird, but specific at the same time.
Well, and they do get a little specific when it comes to like sex scenes themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You're only allowed to show like certain number of thrusting or a certain number of like close-up shots or wide shots of sex.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't ever show like, obviously you can't show penetration. You can't show close-ups of the lower body.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't even know if you're allowed to show like close-ups of like breasts during sex. I don't know if you can or not. I think it might have to actually stay shoulder and up.
I was going to say, I think that the rules about male genitalia are much weirder than female genitalia because
the rules about male genitalia are hilarious.
Yeah.
And I learned the rules because of watching like all the special features of one of my all-time favorites, Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Yeah.
Because Jason Segel he does full male nudity in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And on the special features of Making Ofs, he talks about the rules that they all had to follow and able to have that joke in the film.
Yeah. I remember that so much because I was like, I have never seen a penis in a movie until now. And I'm 20 something years old and I can't believe this has never happened. But at the same time,
it was hilarious. And now I find, well, like, unless you watch Jackass and then you saw penises everywhere.
Sure.
But penises are funny, people. They just are. Penises
they're funny,
are hilarious.
But I also don't begrudge anybody for not wanting to look at them because they're weird.
Right, because they're odd. They're just there.
Yeah.
But I loved hearing him talk about like the rules he had to follow because they had like I forget the title of the person, but there was a specific person there, and I guess there's always this kind of person there to monitor like any nudity, any sex scenes.
Yeah.
There's always a third party there to I agree with their position. They're there to make sure that the setting, that no one's being like manipulated, abused, or anything like that.
Yeah, no funny business.
No funny business, and
it's a comedy.
Dangle in there. It's a comedy.
It's literally there for a joke, yeah.
But he was like, they had very specific guidelines of what was the word? Flaccidness. So like he didn't want to be completely
you can't be too
flaccid,
erect.
But he wasn't allowed to be too erect. And I guess they gave him an actual like spectrum of what was allowed.
Are you saying that they did a level from 6 to midnight where he could be?
Yes, they literally gave him like, here's your levels you're allowed. If you go past this, we're cutting it.
That's really funny. I totally get that because I think that there's a significant difference between an erect dick versus a flaccid dick. But as a dude, if you're going to have your junk filmed on a screen, you don't want it to be turtled up, you know? You want it to be worth showing, I guess. And so you're going to want a little bit of flowing blood in there.
You need some blood pumping, but you can't have a lot of blood pumping, but you need a little blood pumping.
Just enough is the level that you need.
I try imagining like, man, if I was in that position, I honestly don't think I would be able to do it.
Yeah.
I honestly, like, I don't think I could do it. One, I think it would just be too fucking funny and weird for me.
I couldn't get through the scene. It would be so funny.
Because you're not, when actors are nude, when they're doing sex scenes, it is not just them and the cameraman and the director. It's the crew.
Yeah.
And even a limited set, a closed set, is still a handful of people all watching. You have to rehearse this stuff. You have to go through with it with like the ADs. You got to go through it with it.
There's some gaffer and some best boy there holding up the thing, like holding up the microphone right to you while he's standing next to you.
You got the boom mic right above your head. Like maybe not just one, but you got several.
Yeah.
I think I would just be... I couldn't do it. I don't think I have it in me that would ever be able to stand completely nude. So I guess props to those that can, because your confidence is way higher than mine.
Yeah.
And your comfort levels are on a whole nother level for me.
And commitment to the joke, to like, we need to make it work. And
we're saying this as dudes. I will say I also have, because I would not be able to do it myself. I mean, the women that do it, a lot of them talk about how they feel free. I don't get how they're able to do it, because I can't imagine myself being able to do it. And I try to be the kind of person where I don't want to ask someone to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So I feel like, man, I got to have like props to you guys. But sticking with the comedic side, dicks are hilarious. And I think they should always be used as jokes, because that they are.
Yeah. Well, that's much better to make it a joke than to make something threatening, which is, I guess there's three options. There's jokes, threatening, and loving kind, I guess, which is the other option. But that's
right there. Everyone, men and women, everyone listening to this heard you go, lovingly went, it's a dick. There's like nothing loving.
Well, I was like leaving some room for some options. It doesn't have to be threatening or comedic, but nobody else thinks of it that way.
It's just there.
It's just there. Awkward is the other option, the third option.
It's so awkward. I bet you guys didn't think you'd be hearing a penis talk on the show today.
I'm going to put it in the episode description. We get deep into dick talk.
But nudity is interesting.
Yeah.
So male nudity automatically, it's an automatic R. There is no negotiating. It is, if you have male nudity or frontal male nudity, it's an R.
Right.
For graphic nudity, which I think is always like a funny word that they use for their reason. Like, it's not graphic. It's nudity. Just say full frontal.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But for women, you're allowed to show breasts. Like, you can show a pair of boobs in a PG-13 movie. Yeah. You can't show them a lot, but you can have them in it. Yeah. I think one of the best examples of that would be Titanic. Mm-hmm. You have a whole sequence where she disrobes. She's lying on the couch. There's like, you see her almost full frontal. You even see her drawing.
Yeah.
But that did not draw any real criticism. I think that's kind of interesting that...
And you have a steamy sex scene. Rather, it's just a steamy window.
But I mean, it's a steamy window with like a hand slap. Have you ever noticed in a movie sex scene when they're like, if they're in a car with the steamy windows, the hand always slaps. And I'm always trying to figure out like, is that the right hand that would hit that window? Like, what position are you in for that hand to be the one on the window?
I've honestly never thought of it. I don't know.
I don't know. Going to now.
I don't know any movie.
Going to now.
I don't know any movie besides Titanic that has someone slapping a window.
That might be the only movie. No, I just watched another movie recently that had a scene like that in it, and they hit the window, and I was immediately like, "What?" Like,
You're picturing it.
Only the hand, like, yeah.
That's weird.
I was trying to figure out the logistics of it, because let's face it, folks.
Yeah.
As kids, when we saw movies with these kind of scenes in it, when we like got to an age where we were trying to do this stuff, we're actually doing it. We realized the logistics of these settings does not work like it does in the movies.
I didn't think you were going that way, but yeah, I do.
I know what you're saying. I was going to say, like, back seats, not that comfortable.
Yeah.
Bathtubs, fucking bathtubs don't do it.
Yeah. I don't know how many movies I saw where people have sex in the backseat of a car. That's the kind of thing you do once. Like, that's a terrible idea. Don't ever do that.
It's so uncomfortable. It's so odd. And you're like, wait. We don't roll too far to the left. You're going to roll off the seat.
Yeah, that just doesn't work.
Or the right, depending on what window you're facing.
I thought you were going to talk about, maybe this is just me, but I feel like when you are a kid and you're not allowed to see certain movies, you get to a point where at least for me, I was allowed to see most of the movie, but then I'd either have to cover my eyes or leave the room for a certain part. And for me, that meant there was something interesting in it that I wasn't allowed to see. And so then when I stayed home alone, I just put in the VHS and fast forwarded to that spot. And then I was always disappointed. I was like, that's it. I thought it was going to be more than this. It's not that much at all. And
I wasn't allowed to see that one like flash of a side boob. What?
Yeah. and that's saying something when you're a 12, 13-year-old kid who's like, constantly horny. But I think that it's also the funniest thing for me is my parents always forgot that there were boobs in Die Hard. And so I could watch, Die Hard. And then every time that lady gets pulled out when the terrorists show up and they're like, that girl has her shirt off, my mom's like, oh, I totally forgot. And then it's gone and it's too late. It's too fast. But she's like, oh, no, I totally forgot. And so that always makes me laugh.
Your parents weren't the only ones that forgot about that. Mine did every time too. They also always forget about the nudie picture that is hung on one of the walls.
When he's going through,
he even touches it.
Yeah. It's his motivation to keep going.
Yep. Yeah. I was the same way, man. Always like, cover your eyes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting example to bring up one of the inaccuracies or just conundrums of reasons for rating.
Mm-hmm.
The first Anchorman movie is PG-13.
Okay.
I remember watching that movie in the theater and thinking to myself, how is this PG-13?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many, like not even innuendo jokes in the movie, but just blatant jokes in the movie, including an erection.
An erection behind pants. But still the only time
he walks around.
Probably the only time I've ever seen an erection in a movie. Like
he calls attention to it.
Yeah.
For a long time. Like that sequence, that joke. I love that joke.
Yeah.
But it goes on for quite some time.
Yeah.
PG-13. What?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great example. That's such a weird... There's a lot in that movie. Like they have Afternoon Delight. They have a lot of like. There's a fair amount of language, not a lot of language.
The whole
but
Sex Panther thing, where they're purposely picking out colognes that'll help get them laid.
It's a very like 70s like sexual drug fueled news station.
Yeah.
And so it's the trope, and it is what it is. But
I remember
kids.
I remember the only part of that movie that made people be like, oh, dang, that's in a PG-13 was like the coveted PG-13 fuck.
Yeah.
Because PG-13 movies are allowed fuck like once or twice, depending on context. Yeah. Yeah, the word, not the act.
The word of dialogue, yeah.
Well, no, you can have the act. You just have to be careful how you film it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember like when he says... go fuck yourself, San Diego. Like that was the only part of the movie that made everyone go, oh, it's PG-13. They said that.
Yeah.
But he's walking around with a hard on, making you look at it because he walks around that office. Don't act like you're not impressed.
Yeah.
You're like, it's right there. Like you can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, people, dicks are funny though. It just makes the MPAA very inconsistent with their rating. Because I would have figured with their like some of their guidelines, especially their rules about men, like male nudity. Yeah. I feel like that joke would almost warrant just because, it's behind his pants, but he's fully erect.
Yeah,
and you don't see fully erect dicks in movies.
It's not the kind of thing that you have in polite society, which I feel like is what most of their ratings are based on.
Yeah. Wesley is cracking me up.
What do you want?
It's just like, listen, dick.
Yeah. I hear you talking about dicks. You're a dick.
You fucker, you piece of shit.
My dog is very rude.
I lost track of. We were talking about so many dicks and
Yeah.
nudity and sex. You brought this whole thing up. Was there you were going somewhere with it, and then I ranted. I'm sorry.
No, I think it was just nudity and sex in general, and how it tends to be more strictly enforced than violence is kind of the only real bullet point to bring up. And I think you brought up an interesting point that the language is a weird one. We kind of talked about that, where they have like a mathematical equation that you're allowed a certain number of F words, and you can't go over that number, otherwise you're an automatic R rating. Or you can, if you have like 1, you can sometimes appeal, or if you have 2, you can sometimes appeal it to still be a PG-13 based on context. But generally, it's just like automatic R rating if you have too many.
So the context of the F-bomb in a PG-13 rating, you can have, I want to say it's 3.
Yeah.
As long as the context is just like in passing, like you can have a character be like, what the fuck is going on?
Not directed at somebody.
Yeah. But if you say like motherfucker, automatic R. Which is funny. An example of that is, which Die Hard movie was it? You brought up Die Hard earlier, and this just reminded me.
The first one has yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Right, but that's R. No, it's one of the sequels. I want to say it's the 4th one. 4th or 5th one? Is the 4th one the one with Timothy Olyphant?
I think so. It's the one with
the cyber terrorist one
on the 4th of July.
Is that the cyber terrorism one?
I don't remember.
Anyways, it's that one. It's the one with cyber terrorism.
I stopped paying attention after Die Hard with a Vengeance. Because
you kind of don't need 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Did they make a 6th? I don't know.
Possibly.
Anyways, that one's PG-13 because he had his infamous line, the yippee-ki-yay. Well, the MPAA told them if you keep his line, it's an automatic rated R just for that. But the studio wanted the PG-13 rating to appeal to the mass audience and get more of the younger crowd to come in.
Yeah.
So they did one of the dumbest tricks when it comes to editing language. They basically pulled like when a movie airs on TV and they changed the word, or they tried to throw a sound effect or whatever over it.
Yeah.
Well, they did the sound effect route where when he says motherfucker, right as he starts saying the F, he fires his gun, and they put the gunshot in like slow motion so that the kick of it sounds like the ucker part. When I found that out, I was like, see, it's that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
You should just go with, just let him say the line, or just omit the line completely.
And when it's that close, like there's a fine, you're splitting hairs at that point. That's a fine degree of difference between the sounding like ucker or him actually saying ucker. That's crazy.
There's a handful of movies that'll do that, where they'll like mask fucker in with something, and they think they're being clever, but it's always just like, oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be a different way or a better way of doing that.
There's it's in what is it in? Is it in Vanilla Sky? Did Stanley Kubrick do Vanilla Sky? I always confuse Vanilla Sky and Eyes Wide Shut. I'm pretty sure I'm talking about Vanilla Sky.
Well, one has
the one with
one has Nicole Kidman.
The one with Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise and the orgy scene in it.
Yeah, that's Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay, I mean Eyes Wide Shut.
That's a weird fucking movie, by the way.
It is a weird movie, but there's an interesting controversy on this topic where Stanley Kubrick died after that movie was made, and the studio edited it to submit it to the MPAA, and they like digitally imposed objects into the scene to like cover certain things during like the orgy scene and certain shots to hide scenes in the film to get a certain rating. And there's the controversy is that Stanley Kubrick probably would not have done that he's a very specific like blocker, has very specific scenes and shots that if he were alive, that he wouldn't have let his movie be released that way. So that's an interesting thing. I remember I was reading that, I think it was Roger Ebert again. He said that it was like an Austin Powers thing that they did.
Yeah.
Like that joke in Austin Powers where he's always blocked by things in the room, that they did that to a serious movie, which is kind of a weird thing.
It's been a while since I watched that movie. When I saw it, I didn't notice like stuff blocking certain angles or whatnot. I remember watching it and just being like, what? Why would you make this? Like, that was my impression of that movie. By the time it ended, was like, what was the point of this whole movie? Like,
Yeah.
you don't learn anything. You don't feel like you took anything away from it, except rich folk need lives.
Right.
They need better, healthier hobbies.
Right.
I remember when that movie came out, though. That movie was controversial out the gate.
Yeah.
With like so much. I wouldn't call it a controversial movie personally, but it is what it is. But I hadn't heard that. I don't know, because as strict as Kubrick was with his vision and his blocking and his films, man, I don't know. He may have refused some of it.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately he probably would have been okay with some of the, we'll hide this image in the background, or, you know, certain angle of the orgy we can change this way. I could almost see him being okay with that, as long as it wouldn't ruin the integrity of what he was going for.
Yeah. And
but we'll never know, because Kubrick passed away.
I don't know how, like, historically, how willing he was to do that. I think that's probably what you would go to, is like in his other movies, how much flexible was he with his vision as far as.
But even then, I don't know how much you would get, because his other movies were older.
And
didn't do.
None of them had orgies in them, really, that I can think of.
Well, no. I was like, The Shining, you see a guy blowing another guy, but it's real quick, and a lot of people don't realize they saw that.
I was like, the only one I can even think of with a naked lady is The Shining, but
the movie he did before Eyes Wide Shut was Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
That is 12 years in between.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
But yeah, looking at his filmography, I think that was probably his raciest movie.
Yeah.
It's a weird movie, folks. It's a really weird movie. Like, I always view Eyes Wide Shut as the movie that made a lot of people uncomfortable with Tom Cruise. So if you're uncomfortable with Tom Cruise now, you might want to avoid that movie, because it won't help your...
Yeah.
Well, it won't help ease you on your opinion on him.
Right.
Anyways.
Well, it also has to do with like secret societies and cults, and it's not Scientology, but it's a sex cult.
But it's
rich people
it's
stuff.
An odd one. Rich people need healthy hobbies. That was my takeaway from that movie. Was people are all fucked up.
Yeah. Anyway,
I shouldn't generalize, but anyways, should we get into some of the funny reasons?
Yes.
So I won't go over all of them. I have a whole freaking list, but I'll try to keep it minimum to like some of the funnier ones. One of the funniest ones to me, and there are two movies that got this reasoning. So The Monuments Men and the remake of The Magnificent Seven.
Yeah.
Both were rated PG-13, and both had the reasoning of, are you ready?
Ready. Historical
smoking.
Yeah, we don't smoke anymore, people. Just so you know.
Yeah, we don't. Everyone I work with smokes, it seems like. Like, there's so many smokers. I just thought it was hilarious. Like, how do you, just because it's a like period piece?
Yeah.
The smoking changes? What?
Yeah. I think it's more allowable because it was like everybody did it at the time. And so they're like less stringent on it than they are now, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. I just thought it was hilarious. This one made me laugh really hard because I remember watching this movie as a kid. Well, this whole series as a kid. And I can't believe I did not rewatch it for our Kung Fu episode.
Okay.
But Three Ninjas.
Oh, yeah.
Knuckle Up was PG-13 for nonstop ninja action.
That's a marketing thing. Like, no mom in a committee is going to be like, there was nonstop ninja action. I can't believe it. You cannot release this movie as a PG. There was nonstop ninja action.
Nonstop ninja action. What if we just put action? No, they are ninjas. They're kids. They are ninjas.
What if, like,
nonstop?
I imagine someone's like, you can't say that. That will make them want to see it more. Like, no, it was non-stop.
Dude, I remember the Three Ninja series. I watched it like crazy, and I remember it was pretty big for our age group because it was three brothers who were ninjas.
It was directly relevant to our age group.
They weren't turtles. They were like actual kids.
Yeah.
And
it was like
one of the movies.
It was a kid like me who went to a karate class and got an outfit that he just wore around town and fought crime in. Like, yeah, that's perfect.
And in one of the movies, they fought Hulk Hogan. So
exactly. The dream.
Yeah. The dream. Alien versus Predator was PG-13 for violence, language, horror images, gore, and my personal favorite, slime.
I hate when I see so much slime that it just offends me.
So much slime. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch The Indian in the Cupboard. Do you remember that movie, Jake?
Oh, I love Indian in the Cupboard. That was one of my favorites as a kid.
Okay. For those that are too young to know what that movie is, it was a kid's movie about a little toy Indian figure who came to life. And his best friend was the boy that owned this magical cupboard.
Yeah. Before you had Toy Story, you had this kid who had found this random-ass cupboard, and he put any toy in it, and when he opened it up, it came to life, and it was a little miniature Indian that was like a real-life Native American Indian.
Yep. And they became super-duper friends. It was a very...
Until he put a cowboy into the cupboard.
Until he put the cowboy.
And then there was problems.
Well... Then you're going to get a good laugh out of this. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So Indian in the Cupboard was PG for mild language, brief video images of violence, which I was like, what video images of violence?
You probably watched like a cowboy and Indian movie or something.
Oh, maybe. And then sexy dancing.
Sexy dancing?
I was like, what? Sexy dancing. I'm like, I'm going to have to rewatch this movie because now I must know what constituted as sexy dancing in a children's movie.
I'm trying to remember
like that movie.
If he put any girls in there, if it was like a sexy male Indian dancing or something.
Oh my God. I don't know.
I know he put a handful of things in there, but I can't remember what it was.
And then, Batman Returns was PG-13 for brooding dark violence. I thought that was funny. That seemed more marketing than anything to me.
Yeah, definitely brooding.
And it was funny going through there are so many. But it was funny going through these huge lists of like funny reasons, odd reasons why movies got rated what they did. And it seemed like over several websites, it looked like it was unanimous. Everyone's favorite was Team America. And I was like, well, that's odd. Because you should know it's going to be R just because it's Matt Stone and Trey Parker. But then I realized why everyone loved it. So it's rated R for graphic, crude, and sexual humor, violent images, strong language. Okay. And then they have, at the end of it, all involving puppets. And that's why everyone loved that odd reasoning, because it might be the only movie, and this includes Puppet Master, that would get such a hard R because of puppets.
It's true. I would also throw, what was that Peter Jackson movie we watched with Muppets that had like sex and violence?
Oh my God. I just
Meet
lost
the Feebles.
Meet the Feebles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one wasn't on the list.
They're Muppets,
but Dead and Alive was.
Okay.
Dead and Alive was for outrageous gore.
Nice.
But yeah, I was like, fucking puppets. Did you know the sex scene in Team America had to be re-edited 9 times before it was accepted?
Yikes.
And then when they released it on DVD, they threw all of it back in, which is why it's funny. You can always tell what version of the movie people saw. Because you're like, what about that sex scene? And the ones that only saw the theatrical version are like, that was weird. But the ones that saw the unrated full sex scene are like, God damn it, that scene is so wrong.
Yeah. I like that they edit that one 9 times, but Sausage Party was totally fine.
But Sausage Party was like, oh, you got a wild orgy? Whatever. Whatever.
You talking about offensive slime makes me feel like the only movie that should be rated higher for its offensive slime is Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers. There's so much gross slime in that movie, having just watched it for our video game episode.
Well, when I saw slime as a reasoning to justify a higher rating, or in that case, a lower rating, because that should have been rated R. That movie should have been done way differently. Anyways, I was like, man, slime justified a PG-13 rating. So why is Flubber only PG? Because that movie is nothing but slime.
Yeah, that is.
Or Ghostbusters. Why is Ghost 1 and 2?
Oh yeah, gratuitous slime.
Gratuitous slime.
Ectoplasm. That's amazing.
We should try and we should campaign and get on the board for the MPAA.
I know. I'm like, well, as soon as I'm a dad, I'm sending them a letter. I'm like, guess what, motherfuckers? I'm a dad. I'm a parent.
That needs to be your opening line.
Yeah.
What's up, motherfuckers?
Yeah, that's happening. I'll have it.
Oh my God. I genuinely kind of want to do that. Like, send a submission and just be super offensive and just to get the non-reply or an actual reply of we're good.
Dear Mr. Weiser, please do not contact us ever again.
We're putting a cease and desist on you.
Yeah. Your emails will forever go to spam.
Don't come to LA ever. Please stay far, far away.
That'd be amazing.
That would be hilarious. That would be a good prank. I kind of feel like we should, just because it'd be funny. I know we'd get denied, but it would be fucking funny.
I'd hang it on my wall if I got a letter back. That'd be great.
Oh my God, a response letter would be amazing.
I'll send my child's birth certificate so you know I'm a parent.
Yeah, they probably require some proof of parentage, huh?
Yeah, they must. Otherwise, it's bogus. It doesn't really count.
Well, I don't know where I got nothing left. Do you have anything else?
I don't think so. I think we covered all the things I was going to cover. I think in general, we did cover a lot. In general, wrapping up, I think that it's generally good. I appreciate that they have successfully found a system that works without needing a whole bureaucratic system to make things worse. So I think in general, it's a win. I think that it's important when there are inconsistencies, like we have mentioned, for people to point that out and be like, hey, stop being inconsistent. And I think it's the kind of thing that we've seen throughout history. It changes with time, that as the culture gets more comfortable with things, then the ratings will be more comfortable. And I don't think that's bad. I think it's just life. So overall, I think I like you, expected to go into it and be like, fuck those guys. They suck. They're making movies worse. I would rather they didn't. But as you said, the more I read into it and the more I get it, it's a useful thing that, especially for parents, I haven't taken advantage of it yet, but I know I will. So I think it's fine.
Yeah, it's a useful tool. I really liked what you said earlier of, I think it should be taken not as an enforced rule, but as a oh my God, what was the word you used?
Just a recommendation.
Recommendation. Yeah, it should just be used as that. Obviously, parents are still going to make their own choices, rightfully so.
And you should. You should be involved in your children's lives and know what they're doing.
Yeah, but I think that was one thing I did not realize going into it, is that the MPAA specifically exists to be a buffer between a government system and Hollywood, and also for parents by parents of, here's what's in it for your kids, for you to make your judgment on what to allow your children to watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's our MPAA episode. I think we talked about a lot more than I expected us to. That was a lot of dick talk.
I didn't expect that much dick talk, though. I
did not expect that much dick talk. I thought we might make a joke of it real quick, but that was a lot of dick talk.
We got detailed.
and we learned that the MPAA has rules a lot like our rating system.
Yeah. I feel more official now that we're not the only ones with a 6 to midnight rating for something.
Midnight.
Yeah.
Although we allow our rating to go to midnight, whereas the MPAA keeps it at like 6:30.
We're like 7. The opposite, where midnight is a good thing for us and it's a bad thing for them.
Yeah, we want to flaunt the midnight like Ron Burgundy does. So
his is straight at 9 o'clock, straight out.
True. So I think that's because of the pleats. That's like there's restriction there.
His got tight pants. It's hard to get it all the way up there. On that note,
thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Let us know if you think this is a cool idea or a terrible idea, or if you have better ideas. I want to know what you think about the NC17 rating, and if it's garbage, or if it's useful, or if people should use it, or if it's really taboo. What's the deal is. I want to know other opinions. So let us know.
Yeah, I want to hear more on NC17 opinions. Check us out on social, do all the good stuff. Go check out your swag. I'm not wearing mine, but I got my hoodie finally like a week ago. It looks a lot like Jake's, but
this is my second hoodie, because I got the premium version to see how much better it was than the basic version, and it's definitely $10 better. So I would recommend it.
Sweet. Yeah, I have the basic version. I love it. I will say the sizes are a little slimmer than what the tag says.
My wife, who is pregnant, wishes I had gotten a larger one because they're quite slim. They're fitted, but size up, I would say, for sure.
Yeah,
if you want it cozier.
But super comfy, cool logo. I've gotten a lot of reactions when I wear it around, so that's always fun when people realize what the logo is. Mm-hmm. And so go buy some shit. We still have some left, and thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Oh, what are we doing next week? Next week is
I don't remember.
Oh, I do. Next week is our debate episode.
Oh yeah.
The first ever debate episode. So bear with us. Go watch the original Sylvester Stallone version of Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
And also make sure you go and watch the good version, the superior version. With Carl Urban of
leading the witness,
Dredd.
Your Honor.
Overruled.
You're not the judge. Yeah, we're going to be debating. Dustin thinks one is better. I think the other is better. We will be arguing all next episode. So tune in for that.
I imagine our argument it should be childish.
Yeah,
it's going to be childish because it's going to be like two knuckleheads, which is what we are. So go watch those two movies and weigh in on the debate. We're excited about that. And I think that's it. I'm done.
That should be it. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
See ya.